When I opened my eyes, I wasn't staring at the sickly white ceiling of a hospital. A blade of golden light slanted through the gap in deep blue velvet curtains and split across the floor. Expensive incense drifted in the air. The pillow under my head was absurdly soft, 1,000 times better than the flat, busted thing I'd slept on for 3 years in that hospital ward. Nice. Wait, hospital ward? Memories came crashing in, and 2 lifetimes started brawling inside my skull. One belonged to Xiao Yan, college student, Earth, pulling an all-nighter on a term paper. Then everything went black and I woke up in the ER. The other belonged to Eli Black, the bastard son of Marquis Black, of the Kingdom of Orlando. I bolted upright. Carved oak furniture glowed with a warm sheen. A sweeping oil painting of some battle hung on the wall, and the brass fittings on the fireplace were polished bright enough to see my reflection. Transmigrated, and I'd started on the noble difficulty setting. Not bad, actually. As a modern soul raised on web novels, I adjusted fast. A knock at the door. The butler, Sebastian, crisp black tailcoat, silver hair without a strand out of place, came in leading 2 maids. Young Master Eli, today is your coming-of-age ceremony. You turn 18. The Lord and Lady await you in the morning hall. Coming of age. 18. The great dividing line in a noble kid's life. I was grinning on the inside. By every cliché in the book, a bastard like me was getting shipped off, some little southern town, a hot spring estate, a do-nothing sinecure with an annual stipend, basically early retirement. Sunbathing, beautiful women, perfect. I changed into the silver-threaded, deep blue formal robe and checked the mirror. Black hair, blue eyes, looking thoroughly presentable. Head full of rosy daydreams, I marched out after the butler, chin up. The morning hall. The double doors swung open, and the morning light hit so hard I could barely keep my eyes open. The crystal chandelier shimmered even in daylight, and the long table, carved from a single slab of some exotic wood, was polished to a mirror finish. The table was full of people. At the head sat my eldest brother, Callus Black, heir to the family. Handsome, a raven crest pinned to his chest, head down, tapping the table, somewhere else entirely. To his right was my stepmother, Lady Livia. Iron gray gown, hair pinned without a flaw, chin slightly raised. Her gaze landed on me with surgical precision, the corners of her mouth not moving an inch. Yet the disgust radiating off her was practically physical. Down from her sat the family's vassal knights. Some looked sympathetic, some appraising, and a few were hiding smirks of pure schadenfreude. I walked to the foot of the table, to the seat that was mine, and sat. A few seats across from me sat my second brother, Royce, idly toying with a gold pocket watch. He shot me a glance and curled his lip. Callus cleared his throat, his low voice carrying. Today's council concerns Eli's coming of age and his future. Lady Livia spoke, her voice as cold as her face. Eli has come of age. The western frontier is in dire need of fresh blood to develop it. There is no better place to temper one's will and expand the family's holdings. A murmur ran through the hall. The vassals traded looks, called it. Across the table, Royce choked on a mouthful of black tea, coughing violently, his face going red, glaring daggers at Callus the whole time. An old knight rose. Forgive my boldness, my lady, but does the Marquis know of this? Of course, Sir Armand. This is Lord Leon's will. The old knight nodded and sat back down. Callus slowly lifted his head, complicated emotions churning in those blue eyes. By decision of the family, Eli Black, you are hereby invested as a pioneer knight of the kingdom, effective immediately. May you expand the family's borders and win great honor. Every eye in the room turned to me. My mouth opened, but my throat was too dry for sound. The dream of being a useless layabout, the retirement plan, all of it smashed to pieces in that single moment. Out of 1,000 things I could have said, all that came out was a dazed, me? Me, the western frontier, pioneer knight. Those words landed like ice cubes dropped into my freshly warmed retirement dream, shattering it. On Lady Livia's cold face, the faint curve of someone in full control flickered into view. The vassal's stares pricked at me like needles, until I could hardly breathe. Ding. Host's intents will to survive detected. Binding successful. World Intelligence Support System now online. Beginner's Pack, 10 pull intel draw, has been issued. An emotionless electronic voice detonated inside my head. A cheat ability. Standard issue for every transmigrator. Late, but it came. Elation washed the despair away. I clamped down hard on my back teeth, forcing the grin of a man who'd just dodged death down into my eyes, where it burned as two small flames. I straightened my spine. The "who am I where am I" daze on my face dissolved, replaced by 3 parts resignation, 3 parts reluctance, and 3 parts stubbornness. Mother, brother. About this matter of going to the western frontier. I paused. I have no objection. Oh. Lady Livia set down her teacup, an appraising note in her voice. It's good that you understand the family's hard choices. Serving the family is my duty. My expression didn't change as I pivoted. But developing a wasteland can't be done by one man alone. I'll need the family's resources and support. Naturally, we'll discuss the particulars in private later. Mother has a great deal on her plate. I wouldn't dare add to it. I cut in at once, squeezing out a sensible little smile. Why not settle it now, while all the lords are present to bear witness? It would save Mother's precious time. A muffled ripple of laughter ran along the table. The vassals exchanged glances. Clever boy. He's borrowing our presence as leverage. In front of all the vassals, no matter how badly Lady Livia wanted to shortchange me, she had to think of the Marquisate's face. Sending a noble son off to pioneer with a stingy allowance would shame the entire family. That 10,000-year layer of frost over her finally cracked, her gaze sharp as a knife. I met it head-on, eyes clear and innocent. The air froze for 5 seconds. Fine. She forced it through her teeth. 500 gold coins in development funds. 10 family knights to accompany you. Rations for 10, 1 month's worth. The vassals nodded to themselves. Standard, dignified enough. I bowed again, my posture flawless. Thank you for your generosity, Mother. A pause. Also, the choice of those 10 knights. I'd like to pick them myself. You. Lady Livia's anger surged. She was about to snap. Granted. Callus's voice came down like an axe, drowning out my stepmother. He lifted his head and looked at me, his eyes complicated, and, oddly, with a trace of relief. Choose whichever family knights you like. His gaze swept the hall and returned to me. 3 days to prepare. At dawn on the 3rd day, you leave on time. Lady Livia's chest heaved. She let out a cold snort through her nose, swept her sleeve, and left without sparing me another glance. And so the council that decided my fate ended in a way no one had expected. Back in my bedroom, I locked the door behind me and finally let out a long breath. Cold sweat had soaked through the back of my shirt in an instant. Haggling under my stepmother's murderous glare, saying I wasn't nervous would have been a lie. But it was worth it. 500 gold, 10 nights of my own choosing, a month of rations, and 3 precious days. And most important of all, my cheat ability. System interface. A pale blue panel unfolded. In the bottom right corner, the beginner's pack. Icon glittered like buried treasure. I drew a deep breath. Use beginner's pack. 10 pull. 10 beams of light streaked across like shooting stars. White. Tax officer Hans is having an affair with the wife's lady's maid. They often meet at the Gorse Inn in the city's south. White. The secret recipe honey bread from Old John's Bakery in the West End is cut with 15% cheap syrup. White. Butler Sebastian has 0 resistance to almond pastries. White. A brief shower will pass over the East End tomorrow afternoon, lasting about an hour. Blue. The black market vendor Limping Tom has a detailed map of the Kingdom of Orlando, drawn by a mercenary. Blue. Family Knight Orlando is fretting over his mother's medical bills. Blue. A nearly intact set of basic alchemy tools sits sealed in a corner of the storeroom, long buried in dust, untouched. Blue. Brandon. Former elite Kingdom scout, vastly experienced. An old injury and his blunt honesty offended a superior, demoted to tending horses and logistics. Blue Lion. Apprentice at the family smithy, exceptionally gifted. Poor at flattery, offended his supervisor, and now risks being banished to a remote mining region. Purple. Wolfgang Frostclaw. Chieftain of the Frostclaw Wolfkin tribe, mid-tier silver combat strength, currently gravely wounded, unhealed, proud, and unruly. Currently held in the high-risk zone of the Blackstone Town slave market. Key to recruitment. Give him hope of slaying his enemy by his own hand and restoring his tribe. Risk level, extremely high. Reading that last entry, pulsing with purple light, my breath caught. Black iron, bronze, silver. In this world, combat strength was ranked by metal. I'd only just scraped the threshold of black iron, and Wolfgang was mid-tier silver, a full rank above me. If I could land him, a god-tier opening card. The risk was terrifyingly high, but if it worked, my starting lineup would go from a pop gun to a cannon. System, your pack's got a little too much gossip, but the key items are solid gold. I gave the panel a thumbs up, the corner of my mouth pulling into a grin. Early the next morning, someone pounded on my door, bang bang. Before I could answer, the door flew open. Royce's face, stamped with annoyance, filled the doorway. A fat coin purse came flying at me. Take it. I caught it. Heavy in the hand, the gold clinking crisply. 100 coins, give or take. Callus told me to give it to you. Royce was in a foul mood. 100 gold. Calls it compensation. He spat hard. Compensation? He's the one sending you off to die. Don't act like a saint. I gripped the purse, speechless for a moment. I'm telling you, Eli, did fear scramble your brain? Or did your head just spring a leak? Royce raked his fingers through his hair, talking fast and frantic. The Western Wasteland. It's a cafeteria for monsters, a backyard playground for sand bandits. A clown who just barely touched black iron, who spends his days drinking, playing with birds, and ogling pretty girls. What the hell are you going to do out there? Hand yourself over as a between-meals snack for the beasts. It's my choice. There was steel in my voice now. I'll bear it. Huh. Royce stared at me, like he was seeing for the first time this little brother he'd always looked down on. The me standing here, and that heartless wastrel, something about us seemed different. By the way, dear brother, those 500 gold of mine. The corner of Royce's mouth twitched. Right. There's the brother I know. The old butler will bring you the rest. He paused. Here's a piece of intel, free of charge. There's a young man among the family knights named Aica. I've dealt with him. He's all right. He spun on his heel and stormed out, his footsteps thudding away down the corridor. At the doorway, he tossed back one more line. Eli, come back alive. I gave a soft laugh and weighed the purse in my hand. Time to get to work. I headed straight for the stone stables on the west side. In a quiet corner by the haystacks, a middle-aged man with graying hair and an unshaven jaw leaned against a feed cart, whittling a block of wood, slow and unhurried. Brandon. His knife paused. He raised his head slowly. Those eyes were clouded but not dim, settled with weather and stories. That's me, young Master Eli. Do the horses need tending? I'm here for you. I looked him dead in the eye. Brandon, former elite kingdom scout, who once rode with my father through countless campaigns, north and south. Leaving you here to brush horses is the greatest waste of talent there is. His lean frame went rigid. These long-buried events. How could a pampered wastrel of a young master know any of it? Where did you hear that? Wariness crept into his voice. What matters is that I know your worth has been buried. I took a step closer. You shouldn't be rotting in a pile of hay. Brandon was silent for a long while, his rough fingers stroking the block of wood. When he finally spoke, an odd little smile surfaced on his placid face, and he pointed at his own ear. Young master, this old man's getting on in years. My years aren't what they were. Those nice things you just said about me. Could you say them again? I don't think I quite caught it. Me. The sincerity froze on my face. This wily old fox, playing deaf, is it? Fine. No more pretending. I dropped the earnest act and switched to the commanding tone of a spoiled noble. Brandon, pack your things. As of now, you're no longer a stable hand. You're the staff officer accompanying me, Eli Black, Pioneer Knight, responsible for route planning, wilderness survival, and security. Effective immediately. As for whether your ears work, I leaned in one more step, staring straight into his eyes. Doesn't matter. What matters is that you don't have the right to refuse. The simple old man, routine slowly drained from Brandon's face, replaced by a deep, weighted look. As you command, Lord Eli. Quiet, but uncannily clear. Done. I turned and left him standing there alone, his fingertips trailing across the cold edge of his blade, a smile slowly curving his lips. Next stop, the smithy inside the castle. Before I even got close, the clang of hammers and the hiss of iron being quenched rushed out to meet me. The forge fire roared. Bare-chested, brawny men dripped with sweat. The supervisor, Hark, stocky, with a face full of mean flesh, patrolled with his hands behind his back, frowning. The moment I walked in, the racket dropped by half. Hark came at me with a fawning smile. Why, young Master Eli? What good wind blows you here? After a weapon? Or commissioning some tack? I didn't even look at him. My gaze swept over the apprentices who'd stopped their work. Lion. Which one's Lion? Step forward. In the crowd, a solidly built young man jerked his head up, alarm and disbelief flashing in his eyes, reflexively glancing at Hark. Hark's smile stiffened. You're looking for Lion, young master? That clumsy apprentice. His craft is nowhere near ready. Let me arrange the finest master smith for you instead. Quiet. I cut him off impatiently. I asked for Lion. Where is he? Hark's face went rigid. He forced himself to point at the pale-faced young man in the corner. I walked straight over and stopped in front of him. He clutched the hem of his shirt, his coal-smudged hands with nowhere to go. Your Lion? Why, yes, young master. Good. I nodded, then abruptly turned and jerked my chin at Hark. He's mine now. As of this moment, he's no apprentice. He's my personal blacksmith. He comes with me immediately. WH what? Hark's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Young master, this isn't proper. He's still an apprentice. His craft isn't up to par, and the shop's already short-handed. Proper? I scoffed, eyeing him sideways. My rules are what's proper. Being short-handed is your problem to worry about. I want him, so he comes with me. You have an objection? Hark's face turned the color of liver, a vein jumping. Naturally, he couldn't afford to cross a notorious wastrel like me. And then, remembering I was about to be exiled to that certain death western frontier, a vicious little thought welled up in him. You won't last long anyway. He squeezed out a smile uglier than a grimace. No objection. It's his good fortune that you've taken a liking to him. Take him, by all means. I couldn't be bothered with him. I turned to the still-stunned Lion and tipped my chin. Pack your tools. From now on, your boss is me. Lion snapped awake as if from a dream, gritted his teeth, and quickly scooped up that crude box of tools, then took his place behind me with his head down. Let's go. Under the complicated stares of everyone in the smithy, I sauntered out the door. Behind me, I could faintly hear Hark's smothered, furious roar. Cool air replaced the searing heat. 2 key opening cards, in hand. What came next was the main event. After getting Lion settled, I didn't stop. I went straight for the training grounds. Before I got close, shouts and the clash of weapons rolled toward me like a tide. Dozens of knights in standard-issue leather armor sparred, charged, and hacked at wooden posts under the blazing sun, their battle auras pulsing strong or weak. My hand curled into a fist on instinct. A faint, metallic-edged current of air swirled in my palm. The raven breathing technique, passed down in the Black family. Ashamed the original Eli had been so lazy, this body had only reached lower Black iron. In front of these wolfish, tigerish knights, I was as weak as a fresh-hatched chick. My eyes slid over the row of longbows on the weapon rack, sleek lines, strings drawn taut. Before I transmigrated, I'd been a fanatic archery hobbyist. A thunderous cheer suddenly erupted from the center of the field. The captain's magnificent. A tall knight in half-plate slowly sheathed his sword. The hardwood and iron humanoid target in front of him had been cut clean through at the waist, the cut as smooth as a mirror. Captain Roland, the one who'd sat in the front row at yesterday's council. High-tier silver, an elite officer even by the Kingdom Army standards. In this world, combat strength was ranked by metal, black iron, bronze, silver, each rank crushing the one below. Poach him. The thought died the instant it formed. Livia and Callus would be the first to refuse. I walked out of the shadows, applauding. Brilliant. A superb strike, Captain Roland. The whole training ground seemed to hit pause. The news of my exile to the western frontier had long since sprouted wings and flown through the castle. Roland turned, pressed his right fist to his chest, and gave a textbook knight's salute. Young Master Eli. No need for ceremony. I spoke up clearly. You've all heard, no doubt. I'm bound for the western wasteland to establish a settlement. Pioneering can't be done by one man alone. I need loyal, valiant companions. For this journey, I'm selecting 10 knights to come with me. As for compensation, I deliberately drew out the last word and saw quite a few knights prick up their ears. On top of your existing pay, double the salary, double the death benefit, and those who earn merit get first priority for fiefs within the territory. A wave of stifled gasps ran through the crowd. The eyes of the lower-ranked knights lit up in an instant. The lure of gold was real and tangible. But after that brief stir, the training ground sank into a deeper silence. No amount of gold meant anything if you didn't live to spend it. Going to that monster cafeteria with a famously useless wastrel, how was that any different from jumping into a beast's jaws? Roland watched calmly, neither encouraging nor opposing. As expected, the smile on my face didn't change. I said not one more word of persuasion. I simply walked over to the weapon rack and took down a longbow and a quiver of arrows. "Young Master Eli, what are you?" a nearby knight asked, puzzled. I didn't answer. Bow in hand, I walked toward the straw target 100 meters out. The knights glanced at one another. This young master wants to show off his archery in front of us. Men who've been grinding at this for years? Him? I planted myself at the firing line, drew a deep breath, and, a little rustily, knocked an arrow and pulled the string. My form was textbook enough to flash a hint of surprise in Roland's eyes. But as the bow neared full draw, my arm began to shake. I simply didn't have the strength. Whip! The arrow wobbled out, and, still a few meters short of the target, flopped limply into the mud. Laughter exploded. I rubbed my aching arm helplessly. TCH, this bow needs some improvement. Improvement? He knows bows? I raised the bow again. This time, my eyes had changed, sharp as a hawk's, every stray thought gone. Whip! Thunk! The second arrow buried itself in the edge of the target. The laughter cut off short. I didn't pause, pulling an arrow, knocking, drawing, my movements smooth as a machine, carrying a strange rhythm. Whip! Thunk! The third arrow, closer. Whip! Thunk! The fourth arrow, into the red ring. Whip! Thunk! The fifth arrow, dead in the bullseye. Whip! Thunk! The sixth arrow, the bullseye again, its fletching still quivering. The whole field fell dead silent. Every knight stood with his mouth open. That focus, that pinpoint rapid fire. This was the wastrel who only knew how to eat, drink, and play. I turned around, tucked my still trembling right hand behind my back, and smiled easily, as if those 6 arrows had been nothing more than an offhand whim. All right, back to business. My gaze swept over those faces, now without a shred of contempt. 10 spots, all voluntary. When I call your name, if you're willing to come with me, step forward. AICA. A wiry young knight gave a start, then gritted his teeth and stepped out. He was hungry for a chance. Orlando, a blond youth in the back row, jerked his head up, his face all disbelief. I looked at him. I've heard a little about your mother's situation. Come with me. The pay will cover her medicine, and you'll be able to hire a better physician. Orlando's eyes went red in an instant. He strode forward. It would be my honor to serve, Lord Eli. Me too. Pole is willing to follow Lord Eli. A bald giant of a man, built like an iron tower, shouldered through the crowd and slammed his right fist into his breastplate. My lord, I always respected your late mother. She was a kind lady. For that alone, I trust her son. Pole carried real weight among the knights. Several of the hesitant ones seemed to find their anchor and stepped out one after another. In the blink of an eye, counting AICA and Orlando, exactly 10 men stood before me, chins high, the light called hope burning in their eyes. Good, I declared. Your choice today, I, Eli Black, will carve into my heart. I promise you, you will never regret it. The Western Wasteland will be the ground on which we make our names. Then I did something that left everyone stunned all over again. I unhooked the purse at my waist, walked up to the 10 of them, and pressed 5 gold coins into each man's hand. My lord, this is far too much. Orlando's hand was actually trembling. This was nearly 2 years of his pay. Take it. My tone left no room for argument. Settlement money. We leave at dawn, 2 days from now. Understood, my lord. The 10 roared in unison, clutching their coins, morale and a sense of belonging igniting in an instant. 5 gold coins had won them over. I watched the knights leave, fired up, and was just about to catch my breath, when a sob-choked cry came rushing closer. Young master. Oh, my young master. A small, scrawny servant came stumbling and scrambling over and threw himself around my leg, his face a mess of snot and tears. The original Eli's personal servant, Eston. Young master, how could you agree to go to that godforsaken place? Is the Western Wasteland anywhere a human being should go? If something happens to you, how am I supposed to live? Your mother's spirit in heaven won't rest easy either. A vein throbbed at my temple. I shook my leg twice and couldn't get this barnacle off. I drew a deep breath and kicked. Ow! Eston went flying, rolled twice across the ground, his crying cut off mid-wail, and sat there clutching his backside, utterly bewildered. Done bawling? If you're done, get up and work. I looked down at him. I don't have time for your weeping. A few tasks, handle them right away. 1. Go to the Sweetheart pastry shop in the East End and buy 3 boxes of their best almond pastries. They need to be fresh. 2. Go to the black market in Mole Alley and find the vendor nicknamed Limping Tom. Buy back that detailed map of the Kingdom of Orlando he's holding. 3. Get hold of some of the best healing medicine. Remember, the best. The orders rained down like cannon fire, and Eston got so caught up listening that he forgot to sniffle. Got all that? Why, yes, young master. He reflexively snapped to attention, tear streaks still on his face, but a different look in his eyes. I tossed him a purse, too. Money? Young master, when you buy things, you never pay. Eston froze. HM, quick there, quick back. Botch it, and you really will come feed the monsters in the wasteland with me. Yes, I'll get it done, I promise. He startled himself out of his tears, gripped the purse, and tore off at a sprint, 3 times faster than he'd come crying in. As dusk drew in, Eston brought everything back. Well done, my loyal Eston. Go rest. I clapped him on the shoulder. Young master. He watched me walk away, feeling like there was something unfamiliar about me. Besides, when had the young master ever paid for anything? Pastry boxes in hand, I went straight to the office of the butler, Sebastian, and knocked on the oak door inlaid with the raven crest. Come in. I pushed the door open and a smell of parchment hit me. The room was cool, simple to the point of austere. Sebastian sat upright behind a mahogany desk. Young master Eli, what brings you here? Formulaic distance. Mr. Sebastian. I put on a harmless smile and set the 3 boxes of almond pastries gently on the corner of the desk. The 500 gold in startup funds mother approved. By procedure, I'd need to draw the authorization voucher from you, no? Best to settle it early and not waste your time. His gaze swept over the boxes stamped with the Sweetheart logo. That cold, hard face, for once, softened by a fraction. Yes, young master. Young Master Callis has already instructed me. He set down his quill and took out a gold note stamped with the family's financial seal. Exactly 500 gold. I reached for it, but his fingers pressed down on the voucher and didn't let go. From behind his gold-rimmed glasses, he studied me. Young Master Eli, developing a wasteland is no trifle. He weighed his words. 2 points, perhaps, may be of use to you. I was all ears at once. First, that raven you keep. Family tradition, every member, upon coming of age, receives one, fed on their blood, bonded heart to heart. It can carry messages for you in the wilds, warn you of danger, and even briefly share its sight. He paused, a rare thing. Though it may not be as brave as you'd hope. My eyes lit up. The intel system hadn't mentioned this. A useless bird is still a bird. Second, a pioneer territory needs more than knights and craftsmen. It needs basic manpower. Farmers, artisans, drifters, all of which you must recruit yourself. He paused again. Also, regarding your situation, Lord Leon has been kept busy with affairs in the capital. Perhaps. He left it there. I switched to genuine gratitude. Thank you for the advice. I'll use the gold well, and I'll take the raven. As for father, I curved my lips into a knowing smile and winked. I'll find a way. I nudged the pastry boxes forward. Royce said you like these. I hope they're to your taste. Sebastian narrowed his eyes. He didn't look at the pastries, only inclined his head slightly, accepting both the bribe and the farewell. May the spirits of the black ancestors watch over you, young Master Eli. Outside the door, Eston, who'd been craning his neck to peek, rushed up at once. Did you get it sorted, young master? Got it. I patted the voucher tucked against my chest. Didn't I tell you to go rest? What are you doing here? Haha, I was worried about you. That very handsome butler. He clearly can't stand the sight of you. You're amazing. I nodded with reserve. Everyone alive has a weakness. At dawn on the 3rd day, The gray light had just brightened the castle's spires. I called up the system interface. Daily intel draw. A streak of white light flashed by. Your mother is delighted at your departure. Brutal. Eston, tell everyone to gather at the city gate. We leave in a quarter hour. The scrawny servant stuffed a hunk of bread into his shirt and bolted. I pinned the raven crest to my chest and walked over to the bird perch. There stood a pure black raven, feathers glossy, eyes vacant with a dopey look, my little buddy, name of Cobalt. Hey, Cobalt, time to get to work. I held out a finger, and it lazily tilted its head to nuzzle it, then with a caw flapped down onto the leather guard on my shoulder. Come see what a real wilderness looks like. A quarter hour later, the column had fully assembled before the great oak gate. Move out. Destination, Blackstone Town. Blackstone Town was the fief of a family vassal, not far. Riding hard, it took less than 2 hours before its rugged walls came into view. Mercenaries, merchants, adventurers, and drifters all mixed together, the place loud and seething. Following the intel, I led the column straight for the open lot in the northwest corner, fenced off with rough timber, the slave market. Iron cages, wooden stocks, the crack of whips, the cries of slave traders, all of it woven together with the numb, hopeless eyes of the people being sold. My gaze swept sharply across the stalls, one after another. Finally, in the corner with the biggest crowd, I spotted my target. A dozen-odd wolfkin, abnormally tall and bearing wolfish ears and features, were chained inside a specially reinforced iron cage. The one at their head was the most massive of all. Even kneeling, he stood a head taller than the rest. Wolfgang Frostclaw. Damn it. Bunch of ungrateful beasts. A slave trader, his face all mean flesh, lashed the cage with a whip soaked in brine. Bare your teeth at me again, and I'll knock him out one by one. Stop that. I parted the crowd and walked to the cage. Brandon, Pole, AICA, and the rest of the fully armed knights at my back. The trader's whip froze in midair. He narrowed his beady triangular eyes and sized us up. But the moment he made out the black raven crest on my chest, his pupils shrank. Someone from House Black. This, young master. He pasted on a merchant's smile. Interested in this stock? I ignored him, casting my gaze straight at Wolfgang in the cage. Those ice-blue wolf eyes collided with mine in midair. Eston, the salve. Eston dug a fine healing ointment out of the pack and passed it through the gap in the bars. The wolfkin didn't move, wary. Give it to them. I put weight behind the words. Wolfgang was silent for a moment. Then a low growl rumbled in his throat. Only then did a young wolfkin hesitantly take the salve and carefully apply it to his companion's wounds, Wolfgang's most of all. But the trader, Barlow, saw his eyes light up. Someone was buying, and from House Black no less. These proud, unbreakable, badly wounded hot potatoes. Drag it out any longer, and they die on his hands. The young master has such a kind heart. He rubbed his hands together. These are rare wolfkin warriors, strong, tough. Seeing as you're a man of standing, package price, 200 gold. 200, I scoffed, pointing at the half-dead wolfkin in the cage. A pack of troublemakers who could croak any minute? 50 would be too much. Young master, those are just flesh wounds. That's a dozen-plus bronze rank fighters. Bronze rank. I arched my brows theatrically and pointed at Wolfgang. Apart from this leader, the rest are running on fumes, gravely wounded. Who knows how many will even survive? 50. Take it or leave it. Ah, young master, wait. The price is negotiable, 150. 80. 120. You've got to let me at least break even. 80. Flat and final. Behind me, Pole and AICA each took a step forward, hands on their hilts, eyes hard. Sweat beaded on Barlow's forehead. He looked at me, then at the pack of knights watching him like hawks, gritted his teeth. Fine. 80. Consider it a gift to a friend. They're yours. He quickly produced a roll of sheepskin branded with magical runes. A slave contract, bearing the names of all 13, Wolfgang included, along with a thread of their heart's blood essence. Hold this contract, and you held their lives and deaths. I took the contract without even glancing at it, and walked straight up to Wolfgang, who had just finished applying the salve and was now glaring at me coldly. The cage was already open. Lowly human. His voice was hoarse and frigid. Don't dream of making us fight and die for you. Pole, and AICA immediately moved to shield my flanks. I waved them back, ignoring the man-eating menace in Wolfgang's eyes, and walked to within a meter of him. At this distance, if he chose to strike with his full strength, I wouldn't stand a chance. A man who wants to die doesn't bother smearing on salve. I stared into those ice-blue eyes, my voice calm. Wolfgang's pupils contracted slightly. In the instant everyone held their breath, I leaned in and, in a voice only the two of us could hear, spoke each word slowly and deliberately. The destruction of your tribe? Don't you want revenge? His whole body convulsed, his wolf eyes shrinking to pinpoints, shock and towering fury surging up at once. How could this human know? This was a secret carved into the depths of his heart in blood and fire. I straightened and did something that made everyone, even Brandon, suck in a sharp breath. I casually held out the slave contract, the very thing that controlled their lives, right in front of him. Take it. Wolfgang was utterly stunned. He looked at the contract that symbolized his chains, then at my impossibly young face. And in those eyes there was no mockery, no charity, only a kind of unshakable trust. His hands trembling, he took the weightless scrap of sheepskin. Now, I said, the corner of my mouth curving. Can you still walk, Wolfkin? Wolfgang drew a deep breath and surged to his feet. The motion pulled at his wounds and tore a muffled grunt from him, but his massive frame stood straight as a spear. Human, don't underestimate the endurance of the Wolfkin. Good. I nodded, satisfied, and turned to leave. Keep up. He gripped the contract, staring at my completely undefended back, then at his shocked and bewildered kin behind him. At last he let out a low roar and, with his 13 warriors, silently fell in behind me. With my back to them, I let out a long, soundless breath. My palms were slick with cold sweat. A moment ago, I'd been terrified. The intel system was a god, but facing a silver-rank Wolfkin teetering on the edge of despair, with power far beyond mine, any little thing could have gotten me killed. Luckily, I'd bet right. The column had grown again. The Wolfkin followed behind, silent and radiating pressure, and the crowds in the street kept shooting glances and giving us a wide berth. I didn't linger. I headed straight for the family's grain store in the town. Inside, under the Black Raven banner, the clerk nearly knocked over his abacus at the sight of me leading this big crew. You're young Master Eli? What's all this? I scanned the storehouse stacked with sacks of grain and the freight wagons by the door, and said mildly, I'll take it all. Hitch up these wagons for me too. What? The entire stock in the wagons? Young Master, this isn't proper. I have to ask young Master Royce. Proper? I cut him off. Who am I? Your young Master Eli Black. Who runs this store? It's the family trade caravan, under young Master Royce's charge. I've already got Royce's approval. My expression didn't flicker. Count it, load it now. If you hold up my great pioneering enterprise, can you bear the consequences? The clerk looked at the spectacle, then thought about where I was headed. Forget it. Not worth crossing. Yes. Right away. Soon he reported the figure. All the grain plus 7 wagons and draft horses, 123 gold total. Good. Young Master, the money. Since when do I pay for taking my own family's goods? I pulled the same routine at the family's apothecary. That clerk was even more spineless than the grain man, practically in tears as he let me clean out the entire stock of healing salves, antidotes, and pest repellent powder. The sweep complete, I swung up onto my horse and took my place at the head of the column. Brandon was leading the men in a check of the reins on 10 wagons packed to bursting. I cast one last look back at the blurry silhouette of the distant castle and drew a deep breath. The western wasteland moved out. The wheels ground over gravel, kicking up fine dust. A few days into the journey, my ragtag pioneer brigade had already crossed the border of the Black Domain and officially set foot in the kingdom's western frontier. The dopey raven on my shoulder occasionally flew off to circle and bring back fuzzy fragments of vision. But the real divine weapon was that one free intel acquisition every morning at dawn, planning routes, dodging dangers, finding extra rewards. Unbeatable. With it, we avoided several dangerous zones and even happened upon a few patches of rare berries and a couple of dens of plump wild hares and pheasants. Our meals improved dramatically. The old soldier Brandon went from his initial reticence to silent compliance, but the suspicion in his eyes only deepened by the day. This young master's luck was practically like he'd kissed the toes of the goddess of fortune. The trust the knights and wolfkin placed in me also grew daily. A measure of awe entered the former's eyes, while the latter's gaze lost much of its initial frost. That morning's routine pull surfaced a thread of purple light intel. 20 kilometers ahead, at a shallow ford on a tributary of the Blackwater River, a herd of blood deer, 15 head, including 3 fawns, is drinking and resting. Blood deer, legendary rare beasts, their blood and antlers worth their weight in gold, and even at that price, near impossible to find. Brandon, change course, bear northwest, destination the Blackwater Ford, full speed. The old soldier's changing course on a whim could be risky, had barely reached his lips when, looking at the unbroken certainty in my eyes, and remembering the way his old face had been figuratively slapped raw these past days, he swallowed it back down. Yes, my lord. A few hours' hard march brought us to the riverbank the intel had pointed to. The trees were sparse, clear water babbled, and a dozen-odd blood deer with dark red short coats and forked antlers were drinking at their leisure, 3 fawns bounding around their mothers. Wolfgang, I called low. The silver-gray wolf king appeared silently at my side, his ice-blue eyes locked onto the herd. Take your people and circle around from upstream. Cut off their retreat into the deep woods. Capture those 3 fawns alive if you can. He growled once. The 13 wolfkin scattered like hunters melting into shadow, moving without a sound through the brush and terrain. I led Brandon, Pole, and AICA in a slow advance from the front. The encirclement closed quietly. By the time the herd sensed danger and tried to flee, it was too late. Now, roar! Upstream, Wolfgang loosed a sky-shaking wolf howl, his savage silver-rank aura detonating outward. A dozen wolf shadows burst from the brush and severed the retreat. From the front, Pole and AICA charged on horseback like loosed arrows, lances thrusting, blades flashing. The fight erupted in an instant and ended in barely any time at all. Blood deer were fast but poor at fighting. They had almost no means to resist. 12 adults fell dead, and the 3 fawns were lassoed with leather cords, huddling together in terror. A thick smell of blood and a thread of strange, sweet fragrance spread across the riverbank. Brandon, organize the men. Knights collect the deer blood in clean water skins. Don't waste a drop. The Wolfkin brothers have the strength, so they'll handle the skinning. Save the antlers and the sinew too. The division of labor was clear. The knights carefully caught the blood, viscous and gorgeous as rubies, while the Wolfkin skinned and butchered with practiced ease. Watching the water skins fill up with blood, I declared aloud. Half the blood goes out right now to every brother who fought. Drink it on the spot. The other half, store it safely. The whole camp was stunned. Blood deer blood, a legendary treasure. These lower-ranked knights normally wouldn't even be qualified to sniff it. And the young master meant to hand out half, to be drunk on the spot? After a brief silence came a thunderous cheer. Long live Lord Eli. The knights flushed crimson with excitement, fervor, and an utterly devoted loyalty in their eyes. The Wolfkin couldn't understand the words, but they understood my gesture toward them. The stuff was just as good for awakening the power in their blood. You're included too, of course. I nodded at Wolfgang. All you Wolfkin brothers, this is the spoils you've earned. A woo! A wolf howl tore at the sky. For a moment, the cheers of humans and the long cries of the Wolfkin rose and fell against each other, and that invisible barrier between them faded a good deal in the shared joy. Soon everyone had a rough clay bowl holding a little dark red, viscous blood. Drink. I raised my bowl first and drained it in one go. It went down warm. None of the bloody taste I'd braced for, but a thread of sweetness and a searing heat. A surge of pure energy detonated in my belly like a volcano and instantly flooded my limbs and every channel. My blood seemed to boil. My lower black iron aura, like oil set alight, churned, refined, and swelled madly. My skin burned. My face went bright red. Wait, deer blood a great tonic? My face went redder. At the same moment, even more violent surges of energy erupted through the column. HAA. Pole's whole body blazed with bronze-colored aura, his presence climbing rank after rank until he smashed clean through his bottleneck to high-tier bronze. The other knights' auras surged too, their faces wild with ecstasy. Over with the Wolfkin, it was even more spectacular. A dozen pillars of bloody wolf smoke shot skyward, joints cracking, muscles swelling. A young Wolfkin couldn't contain his boiling blood and threw back his head in a long, drawn-out howl. That howl lit the fuse. The knights who'd just broken through were infected by the wildness, and Pole was the first to bellow at the top of his lungs. Roar! A woo! The riverbank turned into a frenzy of dancing demons, human roars and wolf howls shaking the wilds for miles. I watched this primal tribal carnival, the corner of my mouth twitching, fighting down some inexplicable urge of my own, and snapped at the equally laugh-suppressing Brandon with a straight, stony face. Tell them to stop howling. Pack everything up, mind the fawns, load all the spoils, and move out now. Yes, my lord. Brandon worked hard to keep a straight face. Amid a chorus of unsatisfied roars, this overcharged, blood-boiling column once again set off down the westward road. The Lord's kindness, they'd never be able to repay it. What the wheels ground over was no longer gravel but coarse, blood-red sand. The lush trees gave way to sparse, drought-hardy scrub, and the air turned dry and scorching. After a dozen-odd days of trekking, we'd plunged deep into the heart of the western frontier. I rode my chestnut horse, Coalball giving a lazy caw on my shoulder. Gazing into the distance, the horizon warped in the heat haze, boundless and endless. The kingdom of Orlando was vast beyond belief. We'd traveled more than 10 days, and yet it felt like we'd only crawled from the belly of some colossal beast up to its shoulder blade. The Intel system really was a cheat code for wilderness travel. Thanks to it, I'd skirted several bandit strongholds. Knights and supplies were precious assets, no need to slug it out, and found a hidden, uncontaminated underground water source. Whatever scraps of doubt Brandon had left long since evaporated, leaving an almost blind trust. A few days back, the guaranteed 10 pull had even turned up a rare piece of intel. At the western frontier's border, deep within the Forgotten Rift, in a subterranean cavern, the hidden tomb of Ironhand Balder, dating to the era of the ancient League of Free City-States. Hot damn. Am I switching careers to tomb raiding now? I quietly noted down the Forgotten Rift and filed it as an exploration target for when my strength was sufficient. The system also let slip that at least 3 other Houses pioneer parties had already set out. The second son of House Romain of the Crown Domain, the bastard son of House Valantai, and the illegitimate daughter of Duke Lassell of the Eastern Reaches. The setting sun sank, dyeing the wasteland a magnificent, desolate gold red. The column made camp in the lee of a sandstone bluff. The campfire crackled, jerky and drought-hardy tubers stewing in the pot. The knights polished their armor and talked in low voices. After the deer blood and a dozen days of working in together, each one of them carried a keen edge. The Wolfkin ate quietly around their own fire a little farther off, Wolfgang resting with his eyes closed. In the tent at the center, candlelight wavered. I sat cross-legged, sank my mind into my body, and slowly cycled the raven breathing technique. Threads of metallic-tasting black current flowed and circulated through my channels, the warm yet violent energy scouring my blood, the flow quickening, the channels opening through, as if undergoing a transformation. After a long while, I exhaled slowly. The searing heat settled and returned to calm. I'd advanced to high-tier black iron, 2 ranks in a dozen-odd days, that already counted as a 1-in-a-million genius. My guess, deer blood was especially effective on low-rank knights. In this world, a knight's power came from the strength stored within the body, and only a special breathing technique could mobilize it. The knight's path had 6 ranks: black iron, bronze, silver, gold, named, and legendary. At the gold rank, aura could be projected and given form, letting one fight 100 single-handed. I felt the aura surging inside me, several times stronger than a dozen days ago. That bowl of deer blood had been the finest fuel. The starting point was low, but the progress was breathtaking. Eston, asked Brandon to come. The old soldier entered the tent shortly. A dozen days of wind and sand, and my reliance on him, had completely worn away the numbness he'd carried. Brandon, how far are we from Thornhold? the western capital. He studied the map closely by candlelight, his finger tracing a line. At our current pace, about 5 days to reach Thornhold's outskirts. Thornhold, the political and military center of the western frontier. Every pioneer knight had to register and report there to receive their pioneer charter. The sooner you arrived, the more choices you had. Pass the word, we pick up the pace tomorrow. Destination, Thornhold. 1,000 miles away, at the heart of the western frontier, Thornhold. This mighty city, built of obsidian and weathered through countless wars, carried an unspeakable heaviness and exhaustion in the setting sun. Within the heavily guarded ducal fortress at the city's center, in a spacious study, the fireplace blazed. The great mahogany desk stood empty. That was the seat of the Grand Duke of the West, the realm's chancellor, Federico Laroche. But he was far away in the royal capital, mired in a maelstrom. 2 men stood before the desk. On the left, a tall, lean figure, cold of expression, handsome but worn through with fatigue. Lucius Laroche, the Grand Duke's brother, acting steward of the western frontier's affairs. On the right stood a man like a boulder, his fine half-worn plate armor still unremoved. Marquis Marcus Van Helm, holder of the frontier's military command, charged with answering the threat of the Western League of City-States. A long list lay spread on the desk. Marcus's rough fingers tapped at the sheepskin in irritation. Look at what we've been sent. House Romaine's wine cask, House Volanti's sickly weakling, House Black's notorious wastrel, and there's even some slip of a girl. This is the noble's support for the pioneer decree. Lucius stood with his arms folded, his face blank, but his thoughts drifted back to that summer of blood and fire. Queen Irene had died horribly in the capital, and Princess Lynn had vanished while fleeing, her fate unknown. The blame pointed straight at the Crown Domain nobles, and the western frontier seethed with fury. His brother Federico, in his rage, had summoned the vassals, allied with the north, and marched east, blade leveled at the capital. The kingdom had once stood at the brink of civil war. In the end, through the mediation of the king and the other Grand Dukes, and external pressure from the City-State League, the two sides compromised. Federico took the office of chancellor and entered the capital to protect his grandson Prince Aidan until his majority and to investigate the truth, while the western frontier won substantial compensation in exchange. It looked like a victory. But the moment the frontier's main forces shifted east, the jackals of the West, the League of Free City-States, tore up the treaty and, with thunderous force, breached the first gateway stronghold, Stormhold. The collapse cascaded, vast swaths of rich borderland fell, and the defenders pulled back to a hard-pressed second line. To slow the enemy's momentum, Lucius had ruthlessly carried out a scorched earth campaign, burning villages, filling wells, torching fields. The League's coalition finally withdrew, undone by supply problems and infighting over the spoils, but what they left behind was utter devastation, most of it his own handiwork. The Pioneer Decree. He murmured, his eyes complicated. Brother, do you mean to fill the buffer zone with the garbage their families have cast off? Or to spend their lives wearing down the dangers of the fallen lands, to buy the frontier some breathing room? A miracle? Marcus scoffed. Sir, you give these pampered young lords far too much credit. If they make it to their fiefs alive, that's the light God opening his eyes. If you ask me, this is just the Duke's way of weakening the other noble houses, nothing more. Lucius gave a bitter smile for a long while, then finally waved a weary hand, sweeping the list to the corner of the desk like a pile of garbage in his way. Enough. Let them go, sink or swim. His voice returned to the coldness reality had ground into it. We put our energy into rebuilding the defensive line and pacifying the refugees. As for those pioneer knights, the corner of his mouth curved into a frigid arc. Let them go experience what a real battlefield is. 10 days of non-stop riding, and the travel-worn column finally reached the heart of the western frontier. Thornhold appeared at the far end of our view, the great banner atop its walls, embroidered with a roaring golden lion, snapping in the wind. The obsidian walls towered into the clouds, their surface pocked and scarred by frost, wind, and war. As we neared the gate, things turned abruptly. Halt! A bellow tore through the dull air. The previously lax garrison snapped taut in an instant, their pikes clattering up like a forest, all leveled at us in unison. Who goes there? Why do you bring armed beastkin into the city? The air froze. The knights' hands went to their hilts. I swung down from my horse and walked calmly to the front. Pioneer Knight, Eli Black. By the Pioneer decree and my family's command, I've come to register, report, and receive my Pioneer charter. My gaze swept over the golden lion crests on their breastplates. These wolfkin are my lawful followers and guards, not slaves, not bandits. Black, House Black of the Crown Domain. The squad leader scrutinized the black raven crest on my chest again and again. Once he'd confirmed it, neither he nor the soldiers behind him showed any respect. Instead, an even thicker hostility welled up. A noble young master from the Crown Domain, one soldier sneered. Not enjoying the good life back home. So you came to our miserable patch to make your name? Huh, what did you say? The hot-tempered Pole stepped forward. Just as it teetered on the edge of swords drawn, a flurry of heavy footsteps came through the gate passage. Lower your weapons, all of you. A rugged, burly man strode out, swept his eyes over the standoff, and let his gaze settle on me. Captain, the squad leader reported quickly. The burly man raised a hand to cut him off and studied me. House Black's Pioneer Knight? Eli Black. The same. He stared a few seconds, then waved his hand. Lord Lucius's orders. Any who come to report bearing proof of the Pioneer decree are to be admitted and registered without exception. Let them through. The forest of pikes withdrew, opening a path. My thanks, Captain. I swung back onto my horse and rode at the head through the deep, gloomy passage that reeked of saltpeter and rust, casually unpinning the raven crest from my chest. Hide your strength. Don't draw attention. But the moment I set foot inside the city, my heart sank. This was nothing like the western capital I'd imagined. The flagstone roads were cracked and sunken, trash uncleared. The people on the streets were sallow and gaunt, their eyes hollow. Now and then a patrol in battered leather armor passed by, the atmosphere heavy and oppressive. Still, with the western frontier so beset by war, simply maintaining order was no small feat. There were no ripples in my heart over it. The column wove through countless curious or numb stares and finally arrived at the city's center, the La Roche ducal castle. Larger and more forbidding than the Black Marquisite's manor, its fine iron gates were carved in relief with a stately golden lion. Wait here. I handed the reins to Eston, my gaze sweeping over Wolfgang, who gave a slight nod. Young master, be careful, Eston whispered nervously. I straightened my robes, drew a deep breath, and walked alone toward those gates yawning like the maw of a great beast. Announcement, inspection of crest and documents, surrendering my sword. After one rigorous check after another, an expressionless steward led me through cold, gloomy corridors to the depths of the castle. The golden lion crest was everywhere. The oak door swung open without a sound. The room was spacious and dimly lit. 3 people were inside. In the center seat sat a youth of perhaps 14 or 15, still boyish-faced, but laboring to maintain a calm composure, a small golden lion crest pinned to his deep blue formal coat. Seeing me enter, a flicker of curiosity crossed his bright blue eyes, and he forced a gentle smile and a slight nod. Constantine Laroche, son and heir of Federico, Grand Duke of the West. Marquis Marcus sat upright to his left. At the right, before a great arched window, a tall, desolate figure stood with his back to the room. Eli Black. Marcus spoke first, no pleasantries. A fine-looking shell, I'll grant you. Compared to your father, who earned the Black Raven name in the north, you look, well, more like a standard noble young master. Constantine's smile stiffened. He shot Marcus an uneasy glance and lowered his eyes again. That's it. Couldn't even crack my guard. You honor me with the comparison, Marquis. I nodded mildly, openly accepting this inferior verdict. My father's martial achievements are indeed something we juniors look up to. Marcus's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. He wasted no more breath and tapped a finger on the great map of the western frontier spread across the desk. By the Pioneer decree and the Duke's command, every Pioneer Knight may select one parcel of land west of the frontier's line of actual control, from the former Western territories or unclaimed wilderness, no larger than a barony, to serve as a base. Choose, sign the contract, take your charter, and go realize your grand ambitions. The map was richly annotated with mountains and rivers, abandoned villages, danger zones, and scarce mineral deposits. My gaze swept across it quickly, appearing to deliberate, but in truth I'd locked on long ago. The purple light that had flared again 2 days prior. In the southwest of the western frontier, on the outskirts of Nightsong Forest. The surface is barren red earth and sandstone. Roughly 30 meters underground lies a small, but extremely high-grade vein of mithril ore. Mithril, a rare metal with peerless ductility and strength, the core material of top-tier equipment, worth far more than its weight in gold. The LaRoche family had risen on a gold mine in their day and built their Western hegemony on it. I kept up my expression of cautious deliberation, my finger drifting slowly over the map before coming to rest, steady, on a gray-brown patch in the southwest corner marked relatively fertile, monster activity present. Marquis, I'd like to choose here. Marcus looked where I pointed, his voice carrying skepticism. Here? Boy, are you sure? That godforsaken patch of nowhere in the southwest corner? Close to the edge of Nightsong Forest. You could get some timber, but there are plenty of wurgs and wild beasts nearby, except, he paused to recall, except for a small iron mine abandoned a dozen-odd years ago. Maybe it isn't fully tapped out. Constantine craned over curiously as well. My expression didn't change. Yes, Marquis. I've studied the map. It's close to the forest, so timber's convenient. A river tributary runs through it, so water's no worry. The land isn't fertile, but the terrain is open, good for defending a base. As for that abandoned iron mine, perhaps there's still slag to be found, enough to forge basic tools. The reasons were perfectly sound. Well reasoned, I'll admit. A decent eye, maybe. Marcus snorted heavily and picked up a quill pen, ready to mark it. And in that very moment, the figure at the window, standing motionless as a cold statue this whole time, moved. Lucius LaRoche turned slowly. I instinctively raised my eyes. It was a pale, handsome face, somewhat resembling Constantine's. The most striking thing was those eyes, a deep gray blue, without a single ripple. No anger, no grief, no curiosity, only a dead, still calm. His gaze landed on my face, slow and precise. Not sharp, but carrying a cold scrutiny that saw through everything. No question, no challenge, just looking. Just as I was nearly suffocated under that stare, Lucius suddenly gave me the faintest smile. I nodded back almost on reflex, hard enough to verge on rude. Lord Lucius. The air in the room grew even more stagnant. Mercifully, that suffocating silence didn't last long. Sir Eli. A crisp voice broke the deadlock. In the center seat, the young Duke Constantine could no longer rein in his boyish curiosity and leaned forward. I've heard that everyone in your house, Black, has a special raven companion. Is it different from an ordinary crow? Could I see it? The family raven was a core secret. Naturally, it couldn't be leaked. I piled a gentle smile onto my face, my mind racing. A difference, of course there is. I nodded with great gravity, meeting his ever more curious gaze. The biggest difference is that the ravens of House Black have firmer meat, and they roast up much more fragrant. I spread my hands. All you know how it is. Puffed, ha ha ha. Constantine froze for a beat, then burst into utterly unguarded laughter. The boy's laugh was infectious, instantly scattering the last of the room's chill. Even the iron statue Marquis Marcus had the corner of his mouth twitch hard a couple of times. All right. Marcus recovered his cold composure, picked up the heavy steel seal engraved with the roaring golden lion, and stamped it down, thunk, onto the wax at the foot of the charter. The lion mark declared the pioneer contract officially in effect. Take it. He tossed the rolled charter at me offhandedly. I caught it cleanly. It had a slight weight to it. Thank you, Marquis. Then I shifted, looking toward Lucius. Also, this being my first audience with His Highness Constantine, I've prepared a modest gift, which I hope you'll accept. And I'd also like to make a small, mutually beneficial exchange with the Western frontier. My posture was humble, but my meaning was plain. The decision rested with Lucius. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. The steward in the corner understood and withdrew. Soon 2 attendants carried in 2 wooden chests of equal size and set them before me. I opened the first. Atop a bed of dry straw sat 5 plump, wax-sealed leather waterskins, neatly arranged. I pulled the stopper from one, and a strange, sweet fragrance spread out. Blood, dear blood. Top grade. I held the water skin out toward Constantine. I've heard your highness is diligently studying the knight's path. This stuff stirs the blood, tempers the sinews and bones, and steadies the foundation of one's aura. Quite beneficial. A small token of my regard. Blood, dear blood. Marcus's breathing grew noticeably heavier. This kid could actually get hold of something so rare and just hand it over, no questions asked? Constantine's young face lit up at once with delight. I briskly opened the second chest. 5 more water skins. This one, I said, meeting the eyes of Lucius and Marcus openly, I'd like to use to make a deal. A deal? Marcus arched a thick brow, his approval swiftly replaced by scrutiny. Speak. What do you want? Gold. Fine armor and weapons. No, Marquis. I shook my head. I want people. Slaves, knights, craftsmen, any of them. The more the better. Marcus had probably confirmed it in his own mind. This kid really hadn't come out here to die. But he kept it off his face. Do you know what the western frontier lacks most? People. You've got quite an appetite. He jabbed a finger in the air. 50. 50 soldiers with basic training. That's the limit. 150. I held up my fingers. That's not how you haggle. Marcus's voice shot up. Think this is a picnic? 80 at most, and only militia. No cherry picking. 100. I didn't budge. The negotiation looked ready to stall. Give him what he asked. At some point, Lucius had turned back to face the gray, dim view outside the window, leaving only a cold silhouette. His voice wasn't loud, but it was the final ruling that brooked no dispute. 100 soldiers, 30 craftsmen. He paused. And allocate 5 black iron rank knights. Consider it a small courtesy to the first pioneer knight to reach Thornhold, and to come bearing sincerity. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Marcus turned to look at his back, opened his mouth, and in the end let it out as a heavy sigh. Very well, Sir Lucius. He took up his pen, swiftly wrote out the allocation order, stamped it with the steel seal, and tossed it at me irritably. Go collect your people yourself from the recruit camp and the craftsman's camp outside the city. Those 5 knights will report to you. I received it with great care and bowed deeply. Thank you for your generosity, Lord Lucius. House Black will carve it into our memory. The steward stepped forward and reminded me quietly. Sir Eli, by the custom of investiture, you must swear an oath of fealty to your lord. Of course. I walked to the desk and knelt on one knee before Constantine. The boy's young face turned solemn. Doing his best to imitate his father from memory, he drew an ornate ceremonial sword from an attendant's hands, held it level in both hands, and took a deep breath. Eli Black, may you stay true to the pioneer's oath, guard the home you are about to build, and add glory to the western frontier of the kingdom of Orlando. The flat of the blade tapped lightly on my left shoulder. In the name of Orlando and the Lion Banner. Then it traced a bright silver arc to touch my right shoulder. In the name of La Roche, I grant you the right to pioneer. 2 crisp little chimes of metal. I raised my head and spoke clearly. Eli Black will not fail this charge. Constantine sheathed the sword, his young face showing the relief of having completed a grown-up's task. I saluted once more to the 3 great figures who held the western frontier's fate in their hands, then turned to leave. The heavy oak door swung shut behind me without a sound. I stood in the cold, empty corridor and let out a long breath of the stale air pent up in my chest, patting the 2 weighty documents tucked against me. At last, the corner of my mouth lifted, impossible to hold down. Sly old fox. The next day, in a shabby and rented for the time being in Thornhold, I sat cross-legged on the hard plank bed, sank my mind in, and triggered the once-daily pull. The thought had barely formed when the pale blue panel was abruptly drowned in a dazzling, blinding golden light. Golden intel acquired. The 4 characters seared into my retinas like a branding iron. My breath hitched. Princess Lynn Aurora of the Kingdom is disguising her identity with an ancient alchemical creation, the Thousand Faces Mask. Currently suffering a head injury and partial memory loss, she goes by the alias Ella and is hiding among the slaves in the East Market of Thornhold. Lynn Aurora? That princess who'd vanished without a trace after the Queen's assassination. My scalp prickled. A living, breathing princess who held key clues to the bloody affair in the capital. This wasn't intel. It was a fortune dropped straight onto my head. A super bargaining chip mighty enough to shift the entire kingdom's balance of power. Eston, pull. AICA, grab some men. Come with me now. I sprang off the bed and kicked open the creaking door. Thornhold's East Market was like a vast, chaotic beehive. The instant the Pioneer Decree was issued, dormant commercial opportunities sprang to life, and trade caravans from everywhere gathered. The air was a mix of livestock stink, cheap spices, and sour sweat, hawkers' cries rising and falling. Honored young master. Kano Trading Company's fine steel hose, a must for breaking new ground. Buy 10, get 1 free. Top quality linen, 5 silver a bolt. I led my men in roughly shouldering through the crowds blocking the way. Ignoring the goods shoved at me, my gaze locked only on the coordinates the system had marked. The deeper we went, the filthier the surroundings and the thicker the air of despair. At the far end of the East Market, a high-walled lot held no clamor. Only dead, numb stillness and stifled sobbing. Dozens of wooden cages were lined up like livestock pens, crammed with slaves in tattered rags, their eyes hollow. My heart pounded as my gaze swept to the cage at the very end, against the wall. Found her. In a corner of a cage crammed with 7 or 8 female slaves, a figure was curled up. The coarse linen shift was old and filthy, the hair a brittle, malnourished gray-white, the face smeared with grime. But that white hair was the kind unique to the royal family. Ella, or rather, Lynn Aurora, a fat merchant in a greasy leather apron, reeking of liquor, slithered out like a hyena that had caught the scent of blood. His beady mung-bean eyes darted, and the moment he made out the wiry, capable knights at my back, he piled on 12 parts obsequiousness. Why, honored sir, you've got a fine eye. He followed my gaze to the white-haired girl, lowered his voice, and bared a lewd grin. Taken a fancy to this one? A rare bit of goods. Train her up a little, and she'll please you to no end, and she's still a maiden. For gold coins, and she's yours. I fought down the urge to kick him flying and didn't let my eyes rest on his face for even a second. The girl seemed to feel the overly intense stare and shrank back, burying her head lower. Cut the chatter. I spoke calmly, sweeping a finger across the whole area. Every slave you've got here, I'll take them all. Name your price. All of them. The fat merchant's grin froze, his mouth gaping wide enough to fit an egg, his portly frame trembling with excitement. He hastily pinched the spot beneath his nose, afraid he'd faint. In all his years in the slave trade, he'd never met so extravagant a customer. Sir, your generosity is boundless. I've got 380 here, all strong men and young women. Not a single old or weak one to drag you down. Package price, just 220 gold. 180. My face was blank. Ah, sir, you cut too deep. He instantly beat his chest and stamped his feet. 200. I cut off his performance. 1 copper more, and I walk. There are plenty of others out there willing to sell. The wailing stopped dead. The mung-bean eyes calculated rapidly. 200 gold stung, but he'd still rake it in and clear his entire stock in one go. Done. You're a man of decision. 200 gold. They're all yours. He changed his face faster than flipping a page, produced a thick stack of contracts, and offered them up with both hands. I didn't even look, signaling Brandon to step forward and count them, while I walked straight to the cage of the white-haired girl. The cage door opened. You, I said, deliberately keeping my voice level. From today you are my traveling secretary, in charge of documents and personal odd jobs. Understand. Her head jerked up. Beneath the brittle gray hair, those wary, dazed eyes were full of disbelief. Secretary? Not bought to be a? She stared at me blankly, unable to process it. Pull. Find them all some clean clothes. Get them something to eat. Take them back to base. Without waiting for her answer, I turned and scanned the other stalls. Brandon, AICA, Eston, keep collecting people. Round up 500, mostly able-bodied men and women. The next half-day turned into a small storm through the slave district. Sir, 20 strong laborers fresh out of the mines. 15 gold. 10 gold. Take it or leave it. 12. Can't go any lower. Deal. In the end, we rounded up 500 slaves, spending another 70 gold, leaving only 250 in the purse. I rubbed my brow. Money pouring out like water. I still miss the days back in the Crown domain when I didn't pay for anything. The next day, the suffering continued. I dove into the supply market: seeds, grain, medicine, iron nails, rope, coarse linen, everything a pioneer base needed in its early days, all on the sweep clean list. 50 sacks of wheat seed, 100 sacks of black bread flour, 50 barrels of salted jerky, 20 pounds each of styptic herb powder, pest repellent powder, and bitterroot powder, crude iron ingots, nails, hoes, axes. When the last item was loaded onto the wagons, the purse held a lonely 60 gold. My heart bled. I dug out a dozen odd gold coins and tossed them to the 10 knights who'd followed me all the way. Good work. 1 gold each. Relax tonight. Report back in the morning. And buy some meat for Wolfgang and his people while you're at it. Long live the Lord. The knights took the coins, grinning ear to ear. The comfort of gold was always the most tangible kind. After that, I dragged along Brandon, who insisted on tagging along, to the recruit and craftsmen's camps outside the city to take charge of the soldiers and craftsmen, leaving Wolfgang behind to watch over the slaves. What's an old codger like you coming along to fuss about? My lord, don't underestimate me. Keep up. Yes, my lord. At dawn on the 3rd day, outside Thornhold's west gate, a large, mixed composition column had finished assembling. I cast one last look back at the black silhouette of the city, dim in the morning mist, drew a deep breath of the dusty air, and abruptly drew my sword. The blade carved a bright arc in the rising sun, pointing straight toward my domain. Move out. Thornhold fell away behind us for good. The column's skeleton took initial shape under my swift reorganization. 5 bronze-rank Black Knights each led 20 recruits, forming 5 combat squads to ensure orders carried through. Lion managed 30 craftsmen. The newly allotted 5 Black Iron Knights filled out Pole and AICA's guard detail, in charge of close protection and rapid response. The 500 slaves were the main body, the overwhelming majority able-bodied men, with a scattering of women and children. Men and women kept separate, kept in line by a few slave overseers whose eyes still held some clarity. A row of crude cauldrons set over the firewood, the scent of porridge spreading. The slaves lined up clutching rough wooden bowls, soldiers standing guard with weapons, as ladle after ladle of white porridge and chunk after chunk of black bread were handed out. On the numb faces, a measure of gratitude appeared. A mouthful of hot porridge was already a tremendous mercy. Brandon watched them wolf it down, but his brow furrowed tighter and tighter. He leaned in close and lowered his voice. My lord, cooking like this burns through grain too fast. At this rate, I'm afraid. I didn't even turn my head. Brandon, as long as people are fed, they won't make trouble. Keeping them fed is the bottom line. Beside me, Ella, mid-chew, nodded in agreement. Brandon looked resigned. Yes, you're right, my lord. Yet those grain sacks deflating at breakneck speed still weighed heavy on his heart. Me, I wasn't worried. The domain's resources were sitting right there. What I wanted was for more people to arrive alive. As we spoke, a commotion broke out at the edge of the slave crowd. A burly soldier roughly dragged over a boy of 11 or 12 and slammed him to the ground to claim credit. My lord, caught a little grain thief. He was crawling under the supply wagon. Every eye turned. The slave overseers went pale, terrified of being implicated. I crouched down and looked at the trembling child. Why did you steal? He shook his head, frightened, tears carving 2 pale tracks down his dirty face. Wasn't your ration enough to eat? He shook his head, and after a long while squeezed out a voice tiny as a mosquito's. Enough for a little, but I get hungry fast. They said children only get half. The soldier's neck stiffened. My lord, what do slave brats need with that much food? The grain we save. Leave it at that. I cut him off. Hungry? When I'm hungry, I don't just steal. Push me and I'll rob, too. I patted the boy's messy hair. Let him go. Next time you're hungry, go straight to whoever's in charge and say so. The soldier was stunned. My lord, this isn't proper. Stealing grain should be punished heavily, even put to death, to make an example. I stood up, my gaze sweeping over the slaves holding their breath. My rule is this: obey orders and work honestly, and I'll keep you fed. If someone steals, it means my rule hasn't reached far enough yet. I turned to the soldier, my tone gentling. You spotted it in time. Well done. Go to Eston and collect 5 silver as a reward." The reluctance on the soldier's face turned to delight in an instant. "Thank you, my lord. From now on, children aged 6 to 11 get 70% of an adult's ration. Over 11, a full adult's share." The slave overseers nodded again and again. "The Lord is truly merciful." The boy, as if granted a pardon, broke free and with all his strength shouted at me, "My lord, when I grow up, I'll be one of your warriors for sure." Then he scrambled back into the crowd on hands and knees. A wave of stifled, kindly laughter rose through the slaves. Not far off, Ella quietly watched me handle all of this, something turning over behind those clear eyes. This lord really was a bit different. That bit of ease didn't last long before it was broken by an urgent cry carrying a wolfish growl in its throat. "El Lord!" A scrawny figure burst from the brush on the flank. One of the only 2 little wolfkin in Wolfgang's tribe who could speak the human tongue. Wolves. Lots of wolves. Coming from the west. Lord Wolfgang sent me back to report. The ease vanished from my face in an instant. I cursed my own carelessness. The wasteland teemed with danger. How could I rely on the system for everything? I immediately reached out through my mind to Coalball on my shoulder. "Go, take a look." The dopey raven gave a caw and beat its wings, shooting into the high sky. I closed my eyes and shared its vision. Behind the low hills about a mile to the column's west, dust rose faintly, and a great mass of gray-yellow shapes surged low to the ground like a tide, sweeping in to flank us. No fewer than 70. The few at the head especially huge, fangs gleaming ghostly white in the sun. Where are Wolfgang and his people? My eyes snapped open. Hiding behind the slope behind the wolf pack. Good. Go tell him. Hold position. Wait until the pack and we clash head-on and they fall into chaos. Then strike hard from behind. The little wolfkin nodded vigorously and darted into the brush, vanishing. "Brandon, pull." My voice shot up. The orders spread out like ripples. Brandon swiftly pulled the 500 panicking slaves inward, using the heavy supply wagons as anchors to form a circular defensive ring, while 40 pike and shield recruits raised their spear points on the perimeter, shielding the women, children, and craftsmen inside. "All combat personnel, assemble." Pole's roar was like a thunderclap. 60 recruits, 10 Black Knights, 5 Western Frontier Knights, and even Lion and a few sturdy craftsmen who'd snatched up tools, rapidly formed up outside the ring. I took out my longbow and tossed the quiver to Ella. "Stay with me." Then my steady voice carried into every ear. "Stay with me and kill them all. Use their hides for bedding. Use their meat to fill your bellies. Show them who the prey really is." Roar. Pole was the first to erupt in a bellow. "Kill." AICA and the other knights followed close. "Kill. Kill. Kill." The fired-up recruits raised their weapons and let out a ragged but forceful roar. The pack closed in. The lead giant wolf howled bloodthirstily and launched itself at the front rank with a kick of its hind legs. "Loose." Thwip, thwip, thwip. Several of the giant wolves charging at the front took arrows and tumbled, howling. "Pikemen hold." Pole's warhammer whistled through the air and shattered a lunging gray wolf. "Guard detail, protect the flanks." AICA's longsword cleared its sheath as he led 5 black iron knights driving like a sharp wedge into the pack's flank, severing the encirclement. Human roars and wolf howls wove together into a single din. My longbow was a reaper's scythe. Each shudder of the string took a vicious wolf with pinpoint precision. Arrow. Ella, clutching the quiver tight, instantly drew one and handed it over. I knocked, drew, aimed, released, all in one motion, and a Wurg leaping midair at a recruit was run through the neck and crashed down whimpering. Ella gazed at my steady, mounted silhouette drawing the bow, the bright flash of arrow after arrow reflected in her clear eyes, thinking who knows what. The fight didn't last long. Just as the pack was tangled up by the stubborn resistance and slid into agitated chaos. A woo! A deafening wolf howl detonated from behind the pack. Wolfgang's massive frame, like silver-gray lightning, led 13 wolfkin warriors charging down the slope, the long swords I'd granted them plunging viciously into the pack's most vulnerable rear. Caught front and back, the pack instantly fell into chaos, fear overpowering ferocity, and they scattered howling in every direction. After them. Don't let them get away. Pol led the morale-surging soldiers in a countercharge. The brutal fight ended quickly. 60-odd wolf corpses were left on the wasteland. On our side, 5 recruits killed, a dozen-odd wounded to varying degrees by bites and scratches. The wolfkin took a few injuries, but lost no one. I looked at the fallen soldiers being carried away, then at the wounded being bandaged, and let out a long sigh. Clear the field. Lay the fallen brothers to rest with care, and treat the wounded first. Brandon, take people to harvest the spoils. The soldiers carried it out in silence, the mood heavy. I drew a deep breath and broke the weight of it. Now, I ask our hero Wolfgang and all the brave Wolfkin brothers to come to the center. Under the soldiers' bewildered yet awed stares, Wolfgang and his kin walked silently to my side, still spattered with wolf blood, their eyes as proud as ever. It was they who spotted the pack ahead of time and bought us time to prepare. And it was they who, at the most critical moment, struck these beasts a killing blow from behind. I kicked a huge gray wolf corpse at my feet. Look at these carcasses, their meat, their hides. They're the fragrant wolf soup in your bowls tonight. This soup is a gift from Wolfgang and the Wolfkin brothers to all of you. Tell me, are they heroes or not? After a brief silence. Yes, heroes. Wolfkin brothers, well done. The soldiers erupted in cheers first. Then the slaves who'd witnessed it all from inside the defensive ring burst into the wild shouts of those who'd survived a brush with death. Long live the Lord. There's meat to eat. The cheering swept the camp like a tsunami. Watching the Wolfkin surrounded in the center, their spines faintly straightening, watching the cheering, leaping slaves and soldiers, I slowly exhaled the stale breath in my chest. After several more days of trekking, the way ahead of the column opened up all at once. A broad valley spread out before us, and the entire column erupted in cheers mixed with exhaustion and elation. We're here. We made it. There's a river. And woods. Land, it's our land now. On the slaves' faces, color returning to life, smiles bloomed from the heart. Many fell to their knees in their excitement, kissing this barren earth that nonetheless symbolized a new beginning. The soldiers let their nerves unwind too, pounding each other's shoulders in rough, hearty laughter. I reined in my horse on a high rise and gazed into the distance. The wounds of war hadn't yet healed. Charred tree stumps and the ruins of collapsed earthen walls were everywhere, but wild grass spread tenaciously through the rubble. A clear river, like a silver ribbon, wound down from the direction of Nightsong Forest, threading through the valley. The dark green forest in the distance stood like a silent giant, guarding this land. Water, timber, open terrain, not to mention the mithril hidden underground. A surge of high spirits churned in my chest. I drew a deep breath of the air, scented with earth and growing things, and abruptly drew my sword. The blade carved a dazzling arc in the noon sun, pointing straight at the valley below. This place, my voice rose over all the clamor. From this day forward, it is named the Obsidian Domain. Here we put down roots. This is the ground we stand on, the wellspring of our pioneering, and the place where you will all find a home and a living. Obsidian Domain. Obsidian Domain. Long live the Lord. The cheers rolled across the entire valley like a tide. I sheathed my sword and let the orders rain down. Brandon, build the camp centered on the high ground by the river. Housing for the women and children first. Lion, take the craftsmen and find a stable water source. Build a channel to draw water. Pole, AICA, clear a flat patch for a temporary drill ground. Training can't be neglected. Everyone who can move, pick up a tool. Clear the weeds, fell timber, gather stone. Before dark, I want to see the bones of a camp. The orders dropped like a boulder into water, throwing up waves on waves. The well-worked-in column swung swiftly into motion. Male slaves swung hoes and axes clearing rubble. Women gathered branches and thatch to put up lean-tos. Craftsmen rigged bamboo pipes by the river to draw water. Shouts, hammering, splitting wood, and running water wove together into a primal, surging vitality. Through the dust, a crude but thriving camp took shape at breakneck speed on the blood-red earth. Over the next 2 days, I surveyed the surroundings thoroughly and formed a rough plan in my mind. A few days later, the Lord's tent. My lord. Several knights who'd been scouting the perimeter galloped back. We found a human settlement at the edge of the forest to the west. About 200 or 300 people. A settlement. My spirits lifted. I had Ella bring the map. Ella offered the knights hot water, and they hurriedly took it. Haha. Thank you, my lady. Thank you, my lady. Not knowing the truth, they'd long since taken this one woman who stayed at the Lord's side to be his wife. Ella flushed, opened her mouth, and didn't take back the kindness. Good news came in pairs. Lion came running back too, out of breath, his face unable to hold back its excitement. My lord, we found it. That abandoned little iron mine. It's less than 3 miles northwest of camp. The entrance is a bit caved in, but you can still get inside, and the vein doesn't look fully tapped out. An iron mine not yet exhausted. With a steady supply of iron, weapons, farm tools, and building materials all had a foundation. I forced down my joy and decided at once. Brandon, take Lion and survey the iron mine carefully. Mind your safety. Then I waved a hand at the knights. You come with me. Let's go take a look at the settlement. Hooves trampled the wild grass. Soon that settlement came into view. Calling it a settlement was generous. It was more a shantytown clawing for survival at the edge of ruins. A dozen odd lean-tos cobbled together from mud, broken stone, and scrap board leaned crookedly against each other, their roofs covered only in dry grass and tattered cloth, drafty on every side. Hearing the hooves, the people inside poked their heads out and pulled back like startled rabbits. They were barely clothed, filthy and disheveled, sallow and gaunt. The men's eyes were numb and wary, the women clutching skeletal, terror-eyed children. Seeing our bright, polished armor, they backed away, eyes full of fear. It was even more wretched than I'd imagined. I reined in my horse, my gaze settling on a gaunt old man leaning on a stick. Old one, I said, softening my tone as much as I could. What happened here? The old man's clouded eyes looked at me with dread. My lord, the sand bandits come every few days to raid. Grain, women, and the monsters from the forest come at night to drag people off. Crops we plant get ruined before harvest. To survive at all, that's already lucky. What of the administrators? The Lord ran off long ago, one of the locals answered. A few children huddled behind a doorway, cheeks red with cold, peering timidly at the strangers. I fell silent, then dug some dry rations out of my pocket, crouched, and held them out. Here, eat. The children watched warily, none daring to move, as if afraid it was a trap, but the smell of the rations was too tempting, and they couldn't stop swallowing. Eat, I said softly again. At last they couldn't hold back, snatching up the food and wolfing it down, afraid it would vanish the next second. I suddenly remembered that the nobles of the capital fed their cats and dogs the finest meat. It was too absurd. I swung back onto my horse and looked at this land sinking into despair, a heavier sense of responsibility than I'd ever known pressing down on my heart. This land, these people, were mine now. Their despair and their struggle would be carried by me, changed by me. I drew a deep breath, my voice not loud, but cutting clearly through the moaning wind. All who are willing to work, come with me. I'll give you dignity, food, and protection, in the name of Eli Black. The morning of the Obsidian Domain was woken by the sounds of hammering, sawing, and shouting. I'd just finished the daily routine intel pull when a streak of purple light flashed. Buck, the trusted personal guard of Marquis Leon Black, will arrive at the Obsidian Domain before long, bearing an additional 500 gold coins. 1,000 miles away, in the royal capital Orlandia, in the office of the capital garrison, Marquis Leon, who just inexplicably received a word of praise from the Chancellor at the Royal Council, was thoroughly confused. But I didn't do anything. Why would the Chancellor? This Marquis, whom his second son derided for his dull political instincts, truly hadn't caught on. The captain of the guard beside him wore a conflicted expression, but finally spoke up. Lord Leon, the whole capital is saying that your third son, Eli, volunteered to become a pioneer knight and has already set out. So, Eli? A pioneer knight. Leon's first thought went to Livia. Forgive me, my lord. My aunt is not the broad-minded sort. The captain, Elaine Montauban, said it in a low voice, a trace of shame on her face. Leon was silent. He thought of Eli's mother, who had died young, and of his own weakness. No, it was my indulgence. He raised his head, his gaze firm. Elaine, make a trip to the Black Domain. Tell your aunt. This matter ends here. That said, he drew the black family heirloom sword, Cold Crow. Buck, the guard outside, pushed the door open and hurriedly caught the blade flying straight at his face. Take some men to Eli's domain and deliver this to him in person. Yes, my lord. Buck wiped a streak of cold sweat. But then Leon thought of Eli's glorious deeds and remembered the solemn occasion when his own father had handed Cold Crow into his hands, and abruptly calmed down, calling Buck back. Wait, perhaps he'd prefer gold coins. An extra 500 gold? There's such a good thing as this. The corner of my mouth couldn't help curling up. The wastrel verdict in the intel still rankled, but gold was solid, timely rang. Ella, come walk with me. All right, Lord Eli. The change in camp was visible to the naked eye. Centered on the high ground by the river, the residential area was taking shape fast, trimmed logs heaped into little mountains, slaves and soldiers laboring at full tilt under the craftsman's direction, nailing plank walls, laying thatch and mud roofs, digging foundations. At the camp center, I was talking with Brandon and a slave named Old John. Old John was gray-haired and slightly stooped, but his eyes were shrewd, his knuckles thick and covered in calluses. He'd been a craftsman of some small city-states builders' guild, captured and enslaved in the war, and picked out by me at the Thornhold slave market. My lord, he said, pointing at the hide map sketched out in charcoal on the ground. By tradition, the lord's castle is the core and symbol of the domain, and should be built first, laid in stone for solidity and majesty. I shook my head decisively, tapping a few spots on the map. The castle can wait. What matters most right now is defense, and giving everyone, the laborers especially, a place to sleep soundly out of the wind and rain. Quarrying and hauling stone is too slow. We'll use timber, source it locally, build fast. We go by the plan we set earlier. I pointed at the drawing. This stretch of high ground by the river has the best, safest terrain. Make it the residential core and concentrate our efforts first on rows of longhouses, single and double-story, thick plank walls packed with mud and straw for insulation, thatched roofs, each building partitioned into separate units. Over there by the workshop district, build a few large barrack-style dormitories at the same time, somewhere for the newly arrived laborers to land. And storehouses. A big warehouse has to go up first. Grain and tools can't keep sitting out in the open. As for my own lord's manor, I smiled and pointed at my own tent. This is enough. We'll talk about it once everyone's living in a decent house. Lord Eli is a merciful lord, added Ella, her vitality restored, from the side. Next time you could tell me something I don't already know. In high spirits, I cracked a joke too. Old John looked at me. You are a great lord. Then he nodded respectfully. I understand. Everything will be done as you wish. He rolled up the hide map and plunged back into directing construction. You are a... Brandon. I cut off the old soldier's flattery decisively. How's the mine coming along? Lion says he's short-handed. Reporting, my lord. Lion's got 20-odd slave craftsmen clearing the shaft and reinforcing the supports. Small-scale mining is already possible. The trouble is a shortage of miners and even fewer skilled hands. Good. I looked over the bustling camp. Pick 30 more of the strongest from the laborers and put them all under Lion's command. Mining gets priority. Don't toss the slag in low grade, or yet. It may be useful later. Increase the mine guard to 10 men, 2 shifts. Arrangements for the mine settled. I gazed toward the dark green Nightsong forest in the distance. Wolfgang, with his Wolfkin warriors and several soldiers of hunter stock, was gearing up to set out, shouldering spears, bows, and rope, their goal clear, the hunt. Wolfgang, the forest is treacherous, take extra care. Your sense of smell and your alertness are this party's best safeguard. The goal is meat, the more the better, but safety first. The silver-gray wolf king gave a low growl, then turned and loosed a short howl, and the hunting party melted into the tree line like a loosed arrow. Over the next few days, the Obsidian Domain never rested, day or night. Under Old John's efficient direction, wooden houses rose one after another from the ground. In the best spot by the river, a row of single rooms went up first, assigned to Pole, AICA, Orlando, and the other 10 Black Knights, plus the 5 Black Iron Guards. A little farther out were neat double rooms for soldiers and craftsmen. Farther still, rows of longhouses, for 2 a room. For the able-bodied who'd performed well and had a shot at becoming freemen. And at the very edge, barracks-like communal halls housing the 500 slaves. Crude as the conditions were, compared to sleeping out in the wild or the filthy, crowded slave cages of Thornhold, it was a world of difference. At least here it was dry, roofed, and sheltered from the wind and rain. News came from the mine too, though not all of it good. Lion came back to report with a few fresh or samples, his dark face streaked with sweat and worry. My lord, the shaft's cleared and mining's going smoothly enough. But this iron ore is too low-grade. He set down on a wooden block a chunk of dark red or shot through with masses of gray-black impurity. Too many impurities. The pig iron we smelt from it comes out brittle and contaminated, barely good enough for hoes and plowshares. As for weapons and armor, he shook his head. We can't even make the worst standard-issue spearhead. It snaps the moment it's touched. I weighed the dull-colored ore in my hand, brows knitting slightly. Counting on it to solve our armament problem in the short term was unrealistic. But I wasn't anxious. There was still the mithril vein. Understood. Prioritize farm tools. Get the equipment for breaking ground ready first. We'll figure out weapons another way. Safety first at the mine. Keep digging and stockpiling material. The iron mine fell short of hopes, but the completion of the first batch of houses was still the Obsidian's biggest cause for joy. Houses alone weren't enough, though. You also needed people's hearts. To inspire the domain's people, I decided to hold a grand assembly. To make everyone understand. Follow me, and there's good fruit to be had. As night fell, a huge bonfire blazed on the open ground before the valley. All the domain's people gathered around the firelight. Purchased slaves, western frontier locals, drifters taken in along the road, the soldiers and knights who'd come with me. Identities all different, yet in this moment they shared one thing. All were people of the Obsidian. Every gaze turned to the tall stone before the bonfire. I stood there in a black and red cloak, my face flickering bright and dim in the firelight. Once everyone had assembled, I spoke. Today is the Obsidian Domain's first celebration, marking the completion of the first batch of houses. With houses, this land is your home, and you will become the true masters of the Obsidian Domain. But there was no reaction below. They only looked at one another, even at a loss. Become masters, what did that mean? I gave them no time to ponder. Next, I'm going to reward those who are the most diligent and the most loyal. I took the sheepskin scroll Ella and Eston handed me and began reading names. Kend, Marin, Hagen. Those whose names were called shrank back, faces full of dread. In their past understanding, being named by a lord usually meant punishment, even death. The bonfire dyed the Obsidian's night sky a sweep of orange-red. I hereby declare, I raised my voice. These 47 people, from this day on, are no longer slaves. They are the Obsidian's first freemen. Those whose names were called. Some stood frozen, not daring to believe their ears. Some clapped their hands over their mouths as tears burst forth, their whole bodies shaking violently. Some let out cries of wild joy and rushed out of the crowd to throw themselves down and kiss the earth beneath their feet. Freedom. Those two words struck like a thunderclap deep in their souls. Long live the Lord. Cheers, weeping, and congratulations wove together into one. They were led to the Freemen's section, where wooden tokens had been prepared to mark the change in status. Clutching the tokens, they still felt as if they were dreaming. And the many more slaves who weren't called sank into immense loss and regret. Regret that they hadn't worked hard enough. Regret that they'd once slacked off. A stifled bitterness hung over the whole slave district. I took it all in and spoke again. Those who didn't gain freedom, don't lose heart. From today, at the end of every month, new freeman slots will be decided based on labor, loyalty, and contribution to the domain. As long as you're willing to work hard, you'll have a chance to become freeman and even to own your own land. The words landed like a ladleful of hot oil poured on a dying fire. Loss was instantly replaced by rekindled hope. The Lord keeps his word. Now, I swept my arm. Let's eat. Tonight, everyone. Feast to your heart's content. Roar. Long live the Obsidian Domain. The voices were hoarse and trembling, carrying an irrepressible fervor. A young soldier off to the side watched, half-stunned. One man, a few words, and a crowd of numb slaves had become fervent believers. Standing on the high platform, I felt a stir of emotion myself. I didn't approve of slavery, but everything depended on circumstances, and right now I didn't have the means. In truth, the difference here between slave and freeman was small. The harvest would all be turned in and distributed centrally anyway. It was just that splitting them into two tiers, leaving room to rise, did more to spur people on. The soldiers and knights got extra rewards beyond the feast: hide boots, bracers, a few pieced-together leather vests. Many still wore broken boots. A new pair was something they dreamed of. Wolfgang and his people had their new home built in the forest as suited them and were busy settling in just now. Just as the revelry reached its peak, outside the camp's crude wooden gate, a few travel-worn warhorses came to a halt. The knights on them wore the Black family's signature black leather armor trimmed in red. It was Buck, Marquis Leon's trusted man. Buck and his men reined in, staring slack-jawed at the revelry inside the fence. "See, Captain," one of his men said, rubbing his eyes. "Did we come to the wrong place?" Buck wore the same look of disbelief. He raised his head to confirm the black raven banner flying above the camp, then lowered it to check the map's coordinates, and muttered, "The coordinates are right, the banner's right, but this—" He steadied himself, dismounted, and walked toward the gate. The gate guard stopped him warily. Buck produced his crest and token. "Buck, Deputy Commander of the Black family's Black Raven Knights. By the Marquis's command, I seek an audience with young Master Eli Black." At the sight of that black raven crest, the soldier's face turned solemn, and he dashed off to the Lord's tent with word. Soon Buck's party was led through the seething crowd. The whole way, the bustling scene of toil and the genuine smiles on people's faces gave these knights from the Crown Domain a powerful sense of unreality. Was this really the work of that exiled, wastrel third young master? Lifting the tent flap, Buck stepped inside. The furnishings were simple: a wooden table, a few chairs, a camp bed, a raven, and a woman. I sat behind the table, our eyes meeting. Buck froze on the spot. The young man before him wore black and red leather armor built for movement, his face bearing the marks of wind and frost weathering, his eyes sharp and steady, the raven crest bright on his chest, a raven perched on his shoulder. Two figures slowly merged into one in Buck's eyes. "Why, young master?" His voice was hesitant. "You've changed quite a bit." I smiled. "Captain Buck, I remember you. A gold knight, my father's right hand. Quite a journey from the capital, wasn't it? What are my father's instructions?" Buck collected himself and took a step forward. "By the Marquis's command, I bring you a pioneering subsidy, 500 gold coins." So it was the money from the intel. I signaled Ella to take the purse. "Thank my father on my behalf." Then I picked up two sealed letters I prepared earlier and handed them over. One for my father, and the other, I paused. "If you'd hand it to Royce in person." "Yes, young master. I'll see it delivered without fail." "Business is done." I rose, my smile easy. "It's lively out there. You've had a hard journey. Go relax. There's plenty of meat and wine." "Thank you, young master." The tent fell quiet in an instant, leaving only the crackle of the bonfire and the faint clamor outside. The smile faded from my face. I let out a long breath and leaned back against the chair. Ella, who'd been standing silently in attendance, looked at the weariness I couldn't hide between my brows, worked up her courage, and stepped lightly around behind me. Her cool fingertips touched my skin, my body stiffened slightly, then relaxed, and I didn't stop her. Eyes closed, I felt that clumsy but sincere massage, the corner of my mouth lifting despite myself. Inside the tent, there was only the gentle press of her fingers and the faint breathing of us both. After a long while, Ella finally couldn't hold back the doubt long pent up inside her and asked softly, "My lord, back at the slave market, why did you choose me?" She paused. I was clearly just an ordinary slave. My body stiffened almost imperceptibly, so it had come after all. I chose to go around it. "Ella, do you still remember where you came from? How much do you remember of the past?" Her fingers stopped. "I can't remember clearly. It's like I had a very, very long nightmare, and when I woke, I was in a remote little village. An old couple saved me. They'd lost their daughter, whose name was Ella." Her voice softened. "They took me in, cared for me. That time was very peaceful, very happy. But it was as if there was always a voice in my head, urging me, 'Go west, Go west. I don't know why, but that voice gave me no peace. Later I said goodbye to the old folks and went west alone, only to be seized by slave traders in the western frontier, and then I met you, my lord. Her gaze gathered again on my face, choked with feeling. My lord, the way you looked at me then was very different. Do you know me? Know who I am? The air in the tent seemed to freeze. Inside me a storm churned. Tell her the truth? Tell her she was the kingdom's princess, burdened with a sea of blood debt, mired in a political maelstrom? That would be no different from throwing a fledgling that had just escaped the wolf's den back into the abyss. She'd lost her memory, and perhaps that was the light god's protection, keeping her, for now, away from the darkness that could tear her apart. Perhaps a kind lie was the better course. I rose abruptly, and Ella startled back half a step. Under her astonished gaze, I reached out, my movements a little stiff, and gently drew her into my arms. My chin against her gray-white hair, I murmured low, I don't know you. The denial was flat and final. Then my tone softened. I just fell for you at first sight. Your eyes are like a night sky hiding stars. In that moment, all I wanted was to take you away. That's all. The small frame in my arms went rigid in an instant. As for that voice telling you to go west, I tightened my arms a little. Forget it. We've already reached the farthest west. This is the end of the road. Ella, stay. Stay by my side. There's nowhere else you need to go. My lord. Her voice was muffled against my chest, thick and nasal, trembling with disbelief. She hesitated, then raised a hand, her voice thin as a mosquito's hum. My lord, I. She meant to peel off that layer of disguise and show me her true face. Don't move. I pressed down on the wrist she'd raised. This is fine just as it is. Ella, you are Ella. Everything else doesn't matter. Her hand froze. She looked up at my face, mere inches away. Firelight danced in my eyes, reflecting her small face streaked with tears and a flush. All her questions, unease, and fear of the past seemed, in that instant, soothed for a while. She no longer thought of that voice, that mask, that past. She only wanted to hold me. And she did, burying her cheek deep against my chest, reaching out slender arms to wrap me tightly in return. Outside the tent, the clamor of the celebration shook the heavens, the bonfire reddening half the night sky. Inside, the lamplight wavered, and the two of us held each other in silence. All the secrets, all the grievances, were shut out for the moment beyond this small, warm world. The rising sun gilded the obsidian valley, dispersing the morning mist. In the Lord's tent, though, the air was a little delicate. My fingers tapped the wooden table absently, my gaze on the map, my mind elsewhere. Ella brought over a cup of herbal tea, her movements gentler than usual, her eyes flicking quickly across my face before darting down again. My lord, your tea. Thanks. I took the cup, my fingertips brushing the back of her hand by accident, and we both pulled back at once as if scalded. The air stalled, leaving only the steam curling off the teacup and our slightly disordered breathing. Last night's embrace, half lie, half protective intent, lay over us like a thin veil, making even ordinary touches feel charged. The tent flap lifted, and Brandon's weathered face poked in. The old fox's eyes swept between Ella and me, catching her lingering flush and that touch of awkwardness, and his graying brows rose a fraction. He understood at once. Seems the Lord and Miss Ella aren't on ordinary terms. This was a good thing. An air down the road would do much to bind people's hearts together. There seemed to be a little dear blood left in the storehouse. From now on, he'd best treat this young lady with a bit more respect. Showing nothing on his face, he cleared his throat. My lord, you sent for me? Sit. I pulled my mind back and pointed at the high ground by the river on the map. The Lord's Keep goes right here. What do you think? The obsidian's cluster of wooden houses had already taken initial shape. The fortress that would serve as the core of power and defense could be put off no longer. Brandon studied it a moment and nodded. An excellent location, backed by high ground, overlooking the camp and the river. Easy to defend, hard to attack, and well away from the mine and workshops, so it's quiet and safe. He paused. More importantly, once the domain finds its footing, affairs will only multiply. We need a respectable place to hold council, receive guests, even host other houses' envoys. It bears on your dignity, and on the whole obsidian standing. I nodded. Good, right here. Draw up a construction plan as soon as you can. Materials, timeline, manpower, all estimated clearly. Don't make it too elaborate to start. We can upgrade later. Yes, but my lord, there's something more urgent at hand. Brandon's expression turned serious. There's a little over a month until spring, the critical time for preparing the planting. Breaking ground takes a great deal of seed, draft oxen, and farm tools, and we're far short on slaves. The mine and the keep are both short-handed too. And he glanced at me. You said the domain needs a working system. Just the few of us watching over the slave overseers is far too inefficient. We need to recruit or train people who understand management. I'd come prepared. I pulled a heavy purse from my robe and pushed it across. 500 gold. Brandon's eyes lit up. My lord, this. Your assignment. I cut him off. Take a full escort and make another trip to Thornhold right away, or to a nearer trade town. First, buy everything we need for spring planting: quality wheat seed, bean seed, vegetable seed, iron farm tools, draft oxen. Use your judgment. Second, buy another 300 slaves, mostly able-bodied men. Third, I lowered my voice. Keep an eye out for a kind of purple bean seed with a spiral pattern on the surface. Drought-resistant, high-yield, best suited to the western frontier's poor soil, with a distinctive flavor too. Find it and buy it all. Listening, the corner of Brandon's mouth twitched. The task wasn't hard, but a round trip to Thornhold would take a dozen days at the fastest. My lord, he said, full of worry, I'll do my best with the task. But this trip won't be short, and taking too many guards along would leave the domain's security. Wolfgang and his people are brave, but too few in number. The recruits aren't trained yet. If sand bandits or a big pack of beasts came, his worry wasn't unfounded. A chill went through me. I'd indeed moved too hastily. I mulled it over for a moment and thought of my father's Black Raven Knight's guards, especially that vassal, Captain Buck. In my memory, he was gold rank. A bold idea took shape in an instant. Don't worry about guards. The corner of my mouth curved. I have my own way of keeping enough strength here. You just go. Take 2 squads, 40 soldiers, to ensure safety on the road. The domain, I'll arrange. Brandon looked at that familiar yet slightly unfamiliar smile of mine, and his heart skipped a beat, vaguely sensing the young master was about to do something out of bounds again. But knowing my decisiveness well, he solemnly tucked away the purse. Yes, I'll prepare at once. He was about to take his leave when I suddenly remembered something. Oh, and while you're at it, register all the people currently in the domain into a roster. Name, age, special skills, origin. Do a census. We might dig up a few talents like old John. Brandon's step stumbled. He nearly toppled over and whipped around, his voice climbing. My lord, this is abuse of an old man. He pointed at his graying hair. Look at these old bones of mine. Better leave that job to Eston and Miss Ella. Young, good memories, careful with the work. I couldn't help laughing out loud. All right. You focus on the first few tasks. Granted a reprieve, Brandon slipped away. Soon the camp was bustling. Brandon mustered 40 soldiers, and with his list and gold set off for Thornhold in the morning light. Ella and Eston took on the census duty, carrying a stack of papyrus and charcoal, weaving through the camp questioning and recording. And I went to the tent where Buck and his men were resting. They'd just finished the Obsidian's reasonably hearty breakfast and were inspecting their horses and gear, preparing to set off back to the capital to report. Seeing me approach, Buck and his men rose and saluted. Young master, Captain Buck, did you rest well? I asked, smiling. An inexplicable trace of foreboding rose in Buck's heart. Thank you for your hospitality, young master. Very well. Good. My smile grew a few degrees more sincere. Here's the thing. I've received a secret dispatch from my father. He orders you to stay on temporarily to assist me. So hold off on returning to the capital and stay to help me. What? Buck and the few knights behind him started in unison, thinking they'd misheard. Young master, the Marquis is still in the capital awaiting our report, and we bear the duty of guarding. How can we? You're mistaken there. I waved a hand, cutting him off. Report? Simple. Write a letter yourself, and I'll have Colball make a run, carrying your letters and mine back together. Besides, would I, Eli, really deceive you. The Black family's raven could find the Black domain no matter where it was. This was the family's core secret. Buck, who'd seen plenty of grand occasions, naturally wouldn't really be fooled. He just found it a bit funny. This was the Eli he knew, detaining people by force and doing it so brazenly, so high-mindedly, the polar opposite of that upright Marquis. He was more like the Marquis's brother, who died in battle in the north and laid the foundation of the Black name. The named knight, Black Wind, Gordon Black. 10 days. Just 10 days. You and your men are folded into my guard detail, taking my direct command, responsible for the domain's watch and training the troops. Buck looked at me, then thought of what he'd seen in the domain these past days, and his eyes softened despite himself. As if resigned to fate, he bowed his head, right fist to his left chest. As you command, Eli Black. After several days of work, Eston and Ella delivered the thick, bound census to my table. I leafed through it carefully. The charcoal recorded, in crooked strokes, the domain people's names, ages, and origins, and most importantly, special skills. Most read farmer, strong, no special skills, but quite a few talents were tucked away in there too. Fisherman 6? From the eastern coast. My eyes lit up. I called Eston over. Take these 6 to the river, pick a stretch where the water's slow and deep, and set up a temporary dock. Best if they can cast nets and fish. From now on, river fish will be a meat supplement for us. Do it well, and they get priority for freeman status. Yes, young master. 3 hunters, and 1 who served some years as a head huntsman. I immediately sent guards to deliver them to Wolfgang's hunting party. Turning to the later pages, one name made me sit up. Hardy, 57, skilled in agriculture, formerly a farm officer. A farm officer? A professional who managed farmland and irrigation and organized the spring planting and autumn harvest. Ella, ask Hardy to come. Tell him the Lord has something to consult him on. Before long, a middle-aged man, his clothes caked with mud and grass, walked in. Hardy, you say you were once a farm officer. Is that true? As true as can be, my lord. I was the farm officer of Oakwood Town below Stormhold. I couldn't flee in time during the war, and by a twist of fate fell into slavery. I saw no falseness in his manner and said plainly, good. From today, you are the Obsidian's farm officer. Ah, my lord. Hardy is willing to serve you. With the talents preliminarily assigned, I stretched lazily and decided to go watch the recruits' training. With a gold rank like Buck overseeing it, the effect ought to be quite different. I'd barely neared the temporary drill ground when a sharp, killing pressure hit me head-on. Buck stood at the center of the field, no armor, in only a suit of black close-fitting clothes, the invisible pressure of a top-tier powerhouse weighing the soldiers down till they trembled. 60 recruits, split into several squads under Pole and AICA, drilled the most basic thrusts and parries, and he demanded near-brutal precision in every motion. The waist. Power comes from the waist, not from muscling it with your arms. Keep up your footwork. Whoever falls behind drills extra at noon. Your eyes. Look at your enemy. Imagine he's about to tear out your throat the next instant. His voice was like cold iron blocks clashing. No rise or fall, yet it landed heavily on every heart. Pole and AICA drifted back, as if to the old days in the Black domain. Suddenly, a recruit's foot tangled mid-thrust, and his form broke. Buck's gaze went hard. He brought the index and middle fingers of his right hand together and made an empty point through the air. HSSSS. A beam of aura, condensed solid and pale gold, tore through the air, crossing a dozen-odd meters in an instant to strike the recruit's spearhead with pinpoint accuracy. Clang! The recruit felt an irresistible force surge down the spear. Pain shot through the web of his hand. The spear flew from his grip and buried itself far away in the ground, the shaft still humming. The impact sent him stumbling back several steps until he sat down hard, his face white as a sheet. Aura at a distance. This was the terror of the gold rank. Standing on the perimeter, my pupils shrank. Knowing the gold rank could project aura was one thing. Seeing such effortless command with my own eyes was a shock far beyond imagining. A searing heat kindled in my chest. Power. This was the sense of control that absolute power brought. Watching Buck's composed, mountain-still figure, I suddenly recalled a piece of purple light intel the system's guaranteed pull had turned up a few days back. 23 kilometers northwest of the Obsidian, at an abandoned mining pit, the Vulture gang of sand bandits, roughly 60 strong, lies entrenched. Their leader, the Vulture, is mid-tier silver. A bold plan took shape in an instant. Better than passively waiting for the sand bandits to come knocking would be to actively pull out this venomous fong so close at hand. It would net us supplies while blooding the troops and building our prestige. And with a gold rank like Buck holding the line, it was practically a heaven-sent chance. That night, the Lord's tent blazed with lamplight. I marked the coordinates on the map and laid out the whole plan. Captain Buck, 20 li to the northwest, there's an abandoned mining pit where some 60 sand bandits are holed up. Their leader is no more than mid-tier silver. They've plundered a fair amount of supplies, and I want to wipe them out. Buck set down his water cup, glanced at the coordinates, then looked back at me. A mere band of petty thieves. I'll take some men and make the trip myself. Good. How many men do you want? Shall I have Pole and AICA detail some soldiers to support you? The corner of Buck's mouth twitched, a very rare thing. Soldiers? No need. He held up 5 fingers. Counting me, 6 is plenty. The Black Raven Knights set out tomorrow, and we'll be back to report before dark. His tone was flat, but the confidence hit you square in the face. Damn, that cocky? The declaration stunned me for a moment. Then my heart leapt with delight. This was the assurance of the gold rank. Time saved, effort saved, grain saved too. Why not? Then I'll leave it to you, Captain. Do be careful, safety first. Rest easy, young master. Buck inclined his head slightly, then shifted, his gaze settling on me. Also, I've observed your aura, young master. It's far more condensed and substantial than when you left the capital. May I examine it? I was just about to ask for your guidance. I walked to a clear spot in the tent, cycled the raven breathing technique, and the metallic-tasting black current flowed steadily through my body. Buck extended 2 fingers and lightly touched my wrist, and a gentle but pure, vigorous aura probed inward. A moment later, he withdrew his hand, unable to hide the surprise and delight on his face. High-tier black iron, aura well-condensed, foundation solid. Good, good. The Marquis will surely be pleased to hear of it. He remembered the Marquis, saying Eli had barely reached lower black iron. How long had it been? At this rate, even among the capital's prodigies, it counted as terrifying. Could the young master have been hiding his light all along? Were all those past escapades deliberate? But why? Me. I'm innocent here. I kept up my modesty. Pure luck, really, thanks to a little fortune out on the wasteland. A complicated light flashed through Buck's eyes, as if he'd made up his mind about something. Your foundation is firm now, young master. You're aura full. You've reached the stage where you can condense your strength into a weapon and begin to wield the power of aura. I see you favor the bow and arrow, which suits this perfectly. He paused, recollection rising in his eyes. What's more, what I cultivate is also the Black family's secret raven breathing technique. What? This time I was truly shocked. In my memory, only those of black blood could cultivate the raven breathing technique. Buck saw through my confusion and slowly sank into memory. 20 years ago, during the North's Frostwolf Rebellion, I served as a small unit captain in the Crown Army. I was gravely wounded, on the brink of death. It was your late uncle, the Black family's eldest son, Lord Gordon Black, who led his forces to crush the rebels and, by chance, saved me. Seeing my aptitude was passable and my loyalty proven, Lord Gordon privately taught me the first half of the raven breathing technique, on the oath that I would guard the Black family all my life. But in the end, that Black Wind knight who brought glory to the crown and the family was left in the North forever. His eyes were full of remembrance and loyalty. So you needn't doubt, young master. Having me guide you in condensing aura into a weapon is the most fitting. The Marquis is aware of this matter as well. Understanding dawned in me, and a warmth welled up too. The bond between Buck and the Black family ran so deep. No wonder my father had sent him to deliver the money in person. There was probably an intent to observe me in secret as well. Captain Buck, for a night, this is the finest of homes to belong to. Hearing those words again, Buck froze for a beat, then burst into hearty laughter. Ha ha. Yes, it is. Please teach me, Captain. I bowed solemnly. He said no more, having me take up my usual longbow, his broad palm pressing over the back of my hand on the grip. A gentle yet powerful aura led the raven aura inside me to flow slowly along specific channels, gathering in my arm, then seeping and condensing into the bow, and the arrow knocked on the string. In the tent, there was only Buck's low, clear instruction and my fully focused breathing. As for the raid on the sand bandits, it had become an unremarkable trifle, set aside for the time being. The darkness before dawn is thickest. At the edge of the obsidian camp, a few figures silently sorted out saddles and weapons. Buck and 5 members of the Black Raven Knights, fully sheathed in fine black light armor, showed only their cold, sharp eyes, their movements swift and silent, like blades about to leave the scabbard. "Young master, you really mean to come along?" Buck looked at me, equally geared up, just slinging my longbow onto my back. Of course. I swung neatly up onto my horse. A rare chance to witness the Black Raven Knights in action. Besides, I patted the few empty sacks beside my saddle and grinned. "Someone's got to help you clean up the spoils and count the gold, no? Pole, AICA, Orlando, you 3 come too." Pole and the others had long been itching to go, and at the word they mounted up excitedly. Watching a gold rank fight with their own eyes was bragging capital for years to come. Buck said no more. With a light squeeze of his knees, his black horse shot out first like a loosed arrow. The 5 Black Raven Knights followed in perfect unison. I waved a hand and led Pole and the other 10 riders spurring after them. The hoofbeats shattered the dead stillness before dawn, charging straight northwest. The 30 li was crossed at full gallop in the blink of an eye. As the east turned fish-belly white, an abandoned mining pit, eroded by the years, came into view. The pit built against a bare, red, low hill, its entrance deep and dark, crude wooden sheds and tents pitched inside, a few wisps of cooking smoke rising lazily. A few sentry bandits clutched shoddy spears, dozing against a ruined wall. "Attack!" A shrill cry tore through the morning. A sharp-eyed bandit had spotted the dust rising on the horizon and the Black Knights galloping in. The pit erupted in an instant. Bandits scrambled out of their lean-tos half-dressed, some clutching their pants, some grabbing weapons, in utter chaos. A bald giant hauling a heavy battle-axe rushed to the front, screaming himself hoarse, "Grab your weapons! Block the entrance! Where the hell are the archers?" Too late. The Black Raven Knights under Buck didn't slow in the slightest. Facing a few dozen hastily gathered bandits and a few feeble, scattered arrows, they pushed their speed to the very limit instead. 6 pale gold flames of aura blazed up like torches suddenly lit, rising from Buck and the 5 knights. Buck's gold rank pressure rolled over them like an invisible tsunami. The few front-rank bandits raising their spears went white as paper in an instant, their legs going soft, unable to even keep a grip on their weapons. "Charge!" Buck spat out a single word. The next instant, 6 bolts of black lightning slammed into the bandits' chaotic formation. No fancy techniques, only the simplest, most lethal cleaving, thrusting, and ramming. Swords and spears clad in pale gold aura cut like fine blades through tofu. The tearing of flesh, the cracking of bone, the dying screams instantly merged into one. Severed limbs and scalding blood sprayed everywhere. The bandits' hastily cobbled line was ripped to shreds and run through like wet paper. Buck took the lead, the seemingly ordinary fine steel longsword in his hand pulsing with a foot-long blade of pale gold aura, splitting man, weapon, and rotted wood in two wherever it passed. The 5 riders behind worked in seamless coordination, striking left and right, each blow precisely taking one life or several, fast as ghosts, weaving and slicing through the crowd, leaving behind corridors paved in flesh and blood. In a single pass, 6 men on 6 horses had bored clean through the bandits' densest line at the entrance, leaving only corpses and wailing in their wake. Devils. They're devils. Run for it. The bandits collapsed completely, fear spreading like a plague. Talk of a leader, talk of resistance. All of it was a joke before absolute power. Roar. Hold the line for me, damn you. The bald bandit chief, eyes near splitting, swung his axe at one of the Black Raven Knights, bringing up the rear. The knight didn't even turn his head, casually parrying back with the kite shield held in his reversed left hand. Clang! The heavy axe, empowered with silver aura, crashed into the shield and only struck a spray of sparks. The shield didn't budge a hair. Instead, the chief was rocked by the enormous recoil, his arms going numb, the web of his hand splitting, his battle axe nearly flying from his grip. His eyes filled with shock. Mithril. Noisy. A cold voice fell like a reaper's verdict. At some point Buck had wheeled his horse around, an aura spear condensed in his hand. HSSSS. A bolt of black lightning, condensed solid, streaked silently past. Thunk. The bald giant had no time even to react before he was nailed savagely to the wall. The shock froze on his face. He raised a hand to pull it out, the motion stalling midair before it dropped. The chief was slain. The last shred of will to resist shattered completely. The dozen-odd survivors scattered like ants from a kicked nest, crying and screaming, wanting only to burrow deep into the pit or flee into the wild. Captain Buck, leave a few alive for questioning. Shocked by the sheer rout, I finally came to my senses and shouted hastily. Buck made a gesture, and the 5 Black Raven Knights immediately scattered to pounce, precisely intercepting a few bandits who looked like petty officers and subduing them with a rap of the pommel. I didn't sit idle either. I took down my longbow, my eyes sharp as a hawk's, knocked, and drew. Thwip, thwip, thwip. A few aura-infused arrows, as if they had eyes, ran down several bandits fleeing into the wild, easily punching through their backs. The screams cut off short. From start to finish, the fight didn't last as long as it takes to drink a cup of tea. The pit entrance fell dead silent. No fewer than 40 corpses lay sprawled every which way on the ground, with only a few knocked-out captives and a scattering of bandits paralyzed with fear still alive. Buck tossed the captives in front of me like garbage. Young master. I dismounted and walked up to the trembling captive. Pole kicked the back of his knee out from under him, planted a foot on his back, and pressed a sword to his neck. Who are you people? Where did you come from? I asked calmly. I needed intel. The captive had long lost his nerve, snot and tears streaming. Mercy, my lord. I'll talk. We're the Vulture Gang. No. We used to be the Falai City Garrison. Falai, a name I hadn't heard. From the City-State League, the combined army of 7 great city-states and 12 lesser ones. Last year we took a lot of the western frontier. Stormhold was us too. The captive poured it all out like beans from a tube. Later the main force fell to quarreling and said they'd head back west. But we Falai folk are poor. Our turf is small and broken down. Our chief, the one just now, and a Falai noble, Baron Grum, neither wanted to go back, so they took the brothers who didn't want to leave and stayed, seizing a place called Lucerne as a base. I heard some other lesser city-states left people too, but I don't know the details. Lucerne, my eyes narrowed. That place was on the map, not far from the Obsidian, a medium-sized town of the western frontier. How many of you are there? Is Baron Grum at Lucerne? Over 1,000, the captive answered hurriedly. Baron Grum took 500 some and seized Lucerne, means to build it into Falai turf. The rest, like us, split into several bands scattered around, fetching a bit of grain and supplies, and keeping an eye on the Western Army's movements while they're at it. His voice grew smaller and smaller. By fetching, he meant plundering. Over 1,000, holding Lucerne. A chill went through me. This was no simple band of brigands, but an organized army with a stronghold. My lord, I told you everything, spare me. Seeing my face darken, the captive kowtowed, scared out of his wits. I'd gotten the key intel and didn't look at him again, just shooting Pole a glance. Pole understood, and his longsword swept down. The pleas for mercy cut off short. Clear the field, collect the supplies. Deep in the pit, there were still some terrified women and children, who were driven out under the threat of Buck and the others and gathered for safekeeping. The spoils were quickly counted, several big crates of grain and dried meat, enough to feed 100 for over a month. A small sack of mixed silver and copper coins worth about 200 gold, a few dozen rusted, low-grade blades and spears, and most important of all, in a dozen-odd heavy wooden chests deep in the dry shaft, over 100 refined iron ingots stacked neatly. In the chief's lean-to, I also dug up a sheepskin map in a copper tube, finely drawn, marking most of the western frontier's towns, roads, and rivers, even the city-state league's main city-states. Good stuff. I treasured it like a found gem and put it away at once. Bring them along. Send them back to the Obsidian to be settled. These were all labor and potential domain people too. The refined iron ingots and grain were loaded onto the bandits' battered carts. The freed slave women settled aboard, and the party set off home, escorting the rich haul. Barengrum, the city of Philai, over 1,000 rebels holding Lucerne. Beneath this seemingly peaceful wasteland, the undercurrents surged indeed. That band of rebels at Lucerne hung over the Obsidian domain like a sword, a force far beyond what I could presently contend with. Brute recklessness would only bury the hard-won foundation. Back at the Lord's tent, I immediately spread out papyrus and wrote up everything I'd pried out of the captives. Barengrum, the Philai rebels, the seizure of Lucerne, a force over 1,000, scattered bands raiding, into a clearly ordered secret report, solemnly stamped with the Black Raven wax seal. Eston, pick 2 Western Frontier Knights from my guard and ride at full speed to Thornhold. Deliver this letter into the hands of Marquis Marcus or Lord Lucius in person. No stopping on the road. Yes, young master. Eston turned and dashed off. The intel was on its way, but my heart didn't ease much. The Western Army's main force was still shoring up the defensive line. Before their strength recovered, they might not be willing to take the offensive. In the end, the only one I could rely on was myself. Or perhaps the other Pioneer Knights too. 10 days flew by. At dawn, the routine purple light arrived on schedule. The Pioneer Knight registration office in Thornhold is overflowing. Dozens of scions from Crown Domain, Eastern, and Southern houses have been arriving in succession, including your old friend, Clark Graham of the Crown Domain, High Tier Silver. Clark Graham, House Graham of the Crown Domain, the Rose and Sword. The name dropped like a stone into a lake, instantly stirring up the original Eli's memories. On the most fashionable avenue in the capital, 2 boys dressed in garishly gorgeous clothes, arms around each other's shoulders, galloping wild and scattering passers-by in fright. In an opera house box, whistling lewdly at the diva on stage, and dumping vintage red wine onto the bald head of an old noble below, snoring like thunder in the Academy lecture hall, so that the old scholar's beard bristled with rage, and one late night, climbing into some count's back garden to steal the golden apples, then chased by a dozen vicious dogs into jumping into the moat, becoming the capital's biggest laughingstock the next day. Idea King Eli and man of action Clark. This pair of birds of a feather, lawless beyond restraint, the twin stars of the Crown Domain, had once been the talk of countless noble banquets. I rubbed my throbbing temples, the corner of my mouth lifting despite myself. How had this guy ended up out here as a Pioneer Knight too? Banished by his family? Or had he cooked up some new world-shaking scheme? And High Tier Silver at that, should I lure this kid over to be my muscle? Shaking off the memories, I stepped out of the tent. In those 10 days, the Lord's Keep had progressed gratifyingly. On the high ground, polished coarse stone had been laid out into the vast outline of a foundation, buried deep underground, extraordinarily solid. The main structure hadn't risen high yet, but per my function first demand, the core council hall was already more than half finished, a rectangular stone and timber structure, the 4 walls bare stone and raw logs, the floor only tamped earth, yet enormous log pillars held up a soaring roof, and wide windows let in ample light. At the center, a heavy log-long table with a dozen-odd rugged wooden chairs already had the beginnings of dignity. I stood in the empty hall, fingertips brushing the rough tabletop, the future scene of this place packed with people already sketched in my mind. I had a rough idea of who would sit at council too. Head Steward Brandon, 3 slave foremen, 3 freemen's representatives, construction officer Old John, farm officer Hardy, mining officer Lion, affairs officer Eston, Knight Captain Pole, the Wolfkin representative Wolfgang, and of course, the most important seat, the Lord Eli Black. As for the Mithril Vein, Lion's team had located it a few days back per the intel, deep in a well-hidden gorge fissure on the outskirts of Nightsong Forest. But the news on mining it wasn't encouraging. Mithril is mostly found alongside hard rock strata laced with chaotic energy, requiring specialized tools, precise detection, and specialists who understood sealing and channeling the chaotic energy to prevent mine disasters. Lion's eyes had brimmed with tears of excitement, yet he was at a loss all the same. I could only have them keep it secret for now. Luckily, when I'd kept Buck around, I'd already had the Raven carry off 3 letters. The one to my father. At its core, the Obsidian Domain had found an extremely important rare mineral deposit. Mining it posed difficulties, and we urgently needed the family to send a top master craftsman, a family scholar, and a seasoned manager to assist, all under my command. Profits could be split with the family, but the controlling stake in the mining had to stay firmly in my grip. The one to my second brother, Royce, asked him to deploy the family caravan and open as soon as possible a stable trade route from the Crown Domain through Thornhold Strait to the Obsidian, solving both the inflow of supplies and the future outflow of mithril. On the drill ground by the camp, shouts shook the air. Buck, with his 5 Black Raven Knights, drilled pole, AICA, and the hand-picked elites like the strictest of instructors. Formations, charges, coordination, aura application, every item near brutal. A gold rank taking the field in person, even on just the basics, was of boundless benefit to Pole and the others. The soldiers were drilled until they were soaked in sweat and crying out in complaint, but their eyes were full of joy. The training horn sounded, and Buck dismissed them, then led his 5 men straight to my tent. They had their packs ready, their horses already saddled and bridled. I hurried back from the council hall and met them just outside the tent. Captain Buck, gentlemen, setting off, are you? Yes, my lord. Buck put a hand to his chest. The Marquis is still in the capital awaiting our report. We've delayed many days. We must return as soon as possible. The 5 knights behind saluted in unison. They too had accepted me as their lord. I smiled. That's fine. Give my regards to my father. Who knows, we may meet again before long. Buck gave a helpless smile. If this really is the Marquis's command, then I shall of course obey. He clearly understood. Next time he came, it would most likely be bearing some arrangement from the Marquis. His gaze swept over the wooden houses already taking shape in the camp, the work sites buzzing with activity, and the soldiers, so changed in spirit from when they first arrived. He said in a low voice, "Rest easy, my lord. When I return to the capital, I'll report the Obsidian's true situation to the Marquis in full detail. I believe the Marquis will be very glad to see how you've grown." He laid deliberate stress on true situation and very glad. Then he shifted. Of course, your mother, Lady Livia, hearing all this, will likely not be in so pleasant a mood. My eyes narrowed slightly, and I nodded. Thank you for the warning. I have it in mind. Then this is goodbye. Buck cupped his fists, briskly declining my offer of a farewell banquet, and swung onto his horse. The 5 knights mounted up in unison. Hiya! 6 black horses surged into motion like a black whirlwind, galloping east toward the capital, kicking up dust the whole way before vanishing into the horizon in the blink of an eye. In the distance, Buck looked back toward the Obsidian. He had to admit, this young master possessed an unrivaled personal magnetism. Perhaps, as he'd said, they would meet again soon. Ha ha! He suddenly laughed out loud, full of cheer. The knights riding with him exchanged glances. Has the captain taken the wrong medicine? Perhaps. Thornhold, this western capital just catching its breath from the flames of war, was now swept up in another clamorous tide. The street where the Pioneer Knight registration office sat was already jammed solid with all manner of carriages, guards, and gorgeously dressed young nobles. The Pioneers' Market in the west of the city was even more of a teeming din. Brandon, with 40 soldiers escorting several large carts, pushed forward as if through a bog, his weathered face wrinkled into a bitter gourd. What? These few sacks of wheat seed are 2 gold? Wasn't it just 1 gold before? Ah, old sir, look at the market. The slick grain merchant spread his hands at the milling crowd. So many honored young lords and ladies buying seed to break ground. Supply can't meet demand. This price of mine, seeing how much you want, is already a price out of the goodness of my heart. Goodness of your heart? Looks more like a black heart to me. Brandon's teeth itched with rage. The smithy, the livestock market, the sundry stalls, every supply a pioneer urgently needed had gone up at least 30% from a dozen days ago. The merchant's eyes full of the greed of fleecing a fat sheep. Brandon muttered a curse, hyenas profiting off a fire, but, mindful of Eli's instructions, could only force down his anger, compare 3 shops' prices, and use both soft and hard tactics until his mouth nearly ran dry. 13 gold. 1 copper more, and I'm off to Kano Trading Company next door. 5 gold a pair for draft oxen? Are they calves made of gold? For gold. Or I'll go to the countryside and buy from the farmers myself. That price for the farm tools is fine, but throw in 50 coils of good rope, or no deal. He wheeled and dealt like a shrewd old hunter amid a pack of greedy merchants. The process was galling and the prices ran a good bit higher than expected, but he finally rounded up the wheat seed, bean seed, vegetable seed, iron hoes and plowshares, and, most crucial, the draft oxen, and picked out 300 able-bodied new slaves. Only the purple spiral-patterned bean seed went unrecognized by every caravan he asked, large or small, which left him rather regretful. A purchase this large-scale and clearly targeted naturally drew others' notice. That cart train escorted by capable soldiers stood out sharply in the chaotic market. Look at that crest. House Black of the Crown Domain. Black? That Crown Domain bastard, Eli Black? He's not dead yet, and buying on this kind of scale. A starved camel still bigger than a horse. What slips through a marquis's fingers is plenty. At the market's edge, in a crude wine stall, a young man in a flashy, bright purple velvet coat, handsome to the point of looking almost otherworldly, lounged lazily against a table, frowning at the cheap ale, a few finely dressed knights beside him equally bored stiff. It was none other than one of the twin stars of the Crown Domain, Clark Graham. Boring, so damned boring. Clark swirled his cup. Thornhold's wrecked like a dog chewed it. Not even a decent gambling den or a pretty girl. Pioneering my ass. This young master came for some fun. The words were barely out when, from the corner of his eye, he caught that eye-catching cart train in the market and the familiar black raven crest on the guards' chests. His languid golden eyes abruptly narrowed, blazing with startling light. Wait, that crest, that old man. Those are Black family people. Eli's people. Clark perked up as if injected with adrenaline. All his boredom swept away. He tossed down a few silver coins for the ale and nimbly shouldered through the crowd. Hey, old man. Busy are you? Brandon turned, saw that handsome blonde face and the crest on his chest, a golden rose entwined with a thorned sword, and his heart jumped. House Graham of the Crown Domain. And this young lord is, he asked, cautiously keeping up his respect. Clark Graham. The man swept into an exaggerated noble's bow, then clapped his shoulder with easy familiarity. Drop the act, old man. You think I'd mistake the Black family's crest? Where's that kid Eli? Holed up somewhere cooking up trouble? Take me to him, quick. This dump is boring me to death. Another young man with no respect for the elderly. Brandon worked to hold his expression. So it's young Lord Graham. My Lord Eli is at his pioneer domain just now. The Obsidian Domain. The Obsidian Domain? He really went pioneering and became a lord. Clark's golden eyes brightened further. Tell me, what's he getting up to over there? Found any treasure? Peppered with rapid-fire questions, Brandon's head ached a little. He could only patiently, glossing over the sensitive parts, recount how Eli had built a base, taken in the wolfkin, driven off a wolf pack, and organized production. Even so, Clark listened with his eyes shining and his breath quickening. Building a domain, taming wolfmen, fighting battles. This was true adventure, the very life Clark Graham had dreamed of. Fantastic, he paced excitedly. Old man, these supplies are headed back to that obsidian, right? Take me along. Now this instant. Brandon looked at this overexcited young lord and his several hurriedly catching up, helpless-faced men, sighed inwardly, and nodded as if resigned to fate. As you wish, young Lord Graham. Please travel with the cart train. Thornhold Center, the ducal fortress. Marquis Marcus had just received an urgent secret letter and was reading it carefully, a rare gravity surfacing on his face. It was the one Eli had sent. After a long while, he set the letter down and exhaled heavily. Sir Lucius, Eli Black of the Obsidian has sent a secret report. He wiped out a band of sand bandits harassing his domain, and the captives he took, under interrogation, revealed this. The force holding Lucerne is no scattered band of brigands, but the Falai City garrison of the City-State League. Their leader is Falai's Baron Grom, with a force over 1,000. Over 1,000. 500 elite among them hold Lucerne and run it as a base. The rest are split into several bands scattered around, plundering on one hand and watching our Western Army's movements on the other. Marcus paused, his voice carrying resignation and anger. The information is basically reliable. It lines up with the fragments of our scattered intelligence, too. Fly. Lucius's cold voice came, and he finally turned slowly. That pale, handsome face was as expressionless as ever. They're still gnawing at the western frontier's land. The words were very faint, almost to himself. Marcus looked at the deep pain in his eyes and stayed silent a moment. My lord, in the letter Eli requests that the Western Army send troops to wipe them out and end the threat for good. Lucius closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling faintly. A few seconds later he opened them, the churning emotion forced back down, leaving only a deeper coldness and exhaustion. He slowly shook his head, his voice returning to its dead, flat tone. No, my brother's order is to hold the line, build up strength, and wait for his return. Marcus sighed heavily. The answer was expected. He set the letter before Lucius, who didn't look at it. Marcus didn't press, but turned to the great western frontier map, his fingers tapping irritably at the patches scattered across it like rags, the regions the pioneer knights had chosen, and began his daily venting to dispel a little of the weight. Look at these pioneer knights, an utter rabble. That second son of House Harker I registered yesterday, fat as a wine cask, went weak in the knees at the sight of my armor, couldn't even string a sentence together. And that distant nephew of House Kelton is an even bigger fool. Picked a parcel right up against the death marsh with his eyes shut, calling this scenery